The bot Omega they fought over. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Reinhardt. Chapter 1. The Crate She Slept In. She woke to the sound of chains, metal clinking softly, rhythmically, as the wheels beneath her rattled across uneven rails. Darkness was absolute. The kind that pressed in on the eyes no matter how wide they opened. Cold wood scraped against her spine. The air smelled of rust, old blood, and damp straw. Seraphina didn't scream. She couldn't. Her mouth had long been bound with a strip of silk, soaked with the taste of linen and something faintly metallic, perhaps the remnant of another Omega's breath. Her wrists were cuffed in front of her, but tight enough to bite into her skin when she shifted. And she was shifting now, shivering uncontrollably in the box they'd sealed her inside like livestock. She didn't know how long she'd been asleep. Days. Maybe more. All she knew was the silence had changed. The train was slowing. The air shifted, open to light. A sliver of it seared across her eyes when the lid cracked open. "Wakey, wakey, little mouse." The voice belonged to a man she didn't recognize, and she didn't need to. She knew his kind. The handlers always had that tone, mocking, indulgent, too pleased with the power that came from touching something defenseless. Rough fingers gripped her by the arm and yanked her upward. The world spun. She blinked into daylight that was too white, too open, and immediately looked away. Her lashes fluttered over pale cheeks stained with grime, and her lips, muffled by silk, trembled as air rushed into her lungs. "Still can't speak, can you?" the man muttered. "Thought you might have found your voice by now." He didn't wait for a reply. None of them ever did. Seraphina was lifted, dragged half across the crate's edge, and dumped like a sack of spoiled grain into the dust. Her knees scraped raw against stone. Her feet, bare and blue from cold, crunched over gravel as the guards to either side hoisted her upright. The scent of alpha was thick in the air. The East Hell Market loomed before her. A towering arch of iron and bone, black banners stitched with wolf insignias flapping in the wind. Inside, cages, platforms, noise. Rows of chained Omegas stood in line under numbers, their gazes dulled or wild. The place reeked of adrenaline, sweat, and fear, a butcher's yard masquerading as law. Seraphina was marched forward. Somewhere between steps, she felt her shoulder sag beneath the grip of the handler's glove, her balance tipping. She was so light now, lighter than she'd ever been. Food had stopped being something she desired days ago. Or was it weeks? The platform was a splintered disc of wood raised above the crowd. Her chains were reattached to a post at its center. She was made to kneel. Her head hung low, silver blonde hair falling like a curtain around her face. She heard the murmurs before she ever saw them. "Is that one asleep?" "Looks broken." "Too quiet." "Might be defective." The auctioneer cleared his throat with theatrical flourish. "Next lot. Female. 22 years. Omega classification. Documented, though inactive." He circled her slowly, his boots loud on the wood. "Hasn't come into heat in over a year. House trained. Literate. Speech compliant, though currently unresponsive." He stopped beside her, gripped her chin with a thick, ringed hand, jerking her face up to the crowd. A few chuckles. A few disapproving sneers. She blinked. The sun lit her eyes with painful clarity. Watery gray-blue irises. Dilated pupils. No fight. "Teeth decent," the auctioneer announced. "All limbs intact. She doesn't bite, doesn't flinch." A pause. He leaned closer and peeled the silk down, letting it dangle from her throat like a useless ribbon. "Say something, darling," he coaxed with mock kindness. Seraphina opened her mouth. No sound came out. Only a tiny tremble in her jaw, and the hitch of her breath as if she'd forgotten how to breathe correctly. "She's pretty," someone said. "But she's too pale. Fragile. Like a dead doll," another alpha muttered. "Useless if she won't respond. Could be faking it." Seraphina's vision blurred. She wasn't sure if it was from light or humiliation or the heat suddenly creeping into her neck. Her hands clenched around the chains, fingertips white. The auctioneer sighed. "Not much of a show, is she?" He straightened, voice hardening. "Refused 4 standard triggers. No heat. No pheromone response. No obedience training logged. Useless in standard breeding houses." He gave her a little kick. Not hard, but enough to make her sway. "And yet, I've seen this before," he muttered. "The quiet ones? Sometimes they turn out the best, given the right alpha." A few interested glances, but no offers. The bidding didn't even start. Silence hung heavy over the crowd. Some began to disperse. The auctioneer cursed under his breath. "Well, if no one wants the mute little Omega, we'll put her in holding with the other misfits. Or burn her papers and sell her off market." But then someone whispered. It wasn't a voice so much as a ripple in the atmosphere. A stir. Heads turned. A wave parted in the crowd. And at the edge of the market, beneath the high archway, stood a figure in pale gray. He wore a mask. A polished bone plate carved with silver runes and wolfish sigils. His cloak fluttered like mist around him, boots silent as he stepped forward. The sunlight caught on a lock of white hair. The auctioneer stopped speaking mid-word. A single gesture from the masked man. 2 fingers. A number. The price. "Sold," the auctioneer croaked. "Almost immediately. Lot 41. Final offer. Paid in full." Seraphina flinched as her chains were jerked. One of the guards leaned close to her ear, dragging her back to her feet. "Looks like someone wants you, after all," he murmured. "You ought to thank him." No one else even looked twice. But he looked once, at your neck. She didn't understand. She couldn't turn to see the man. She only knew the moment she was led away, she felt his gaze on her. Heavy. Measured. Like the weight of teeth before the bite. And somewhere, deep in her spine, where instincts survived when language failed, something trembled in answer. Chapter 2: The Girl Who Won't Look Up. The chains were quieter now. They didn't rattle or scrape. They simply hung, cold and inert, from the metal collar locked around her neck, dragging faintly as she walked. The corridor stretched long and narrow, lined in gray stone and dark wood, torchlight flickering against the damp from the mountain fog. Seraphina followed the sound of boots ahead of her, her bare feet shuffling over the woven rug that ran like a blood trail down the center of the hall. She didn't lift her head. The guards said nothing. They didn't need to. Their hands stayed close to the hilts of their blades, not from fear of her, but in anticipation of something else, of who she was being led to meet. At the end of the corridor, a wrought iron door waited. It hissed open on ancient hinges. The room beyond was stone, empty and circular, with no windows. Only a small pile of folded linens, a water basin, and a cot pushed into the far corner like an afterthought. There were no blankets. No fire. No softness anywhere. Seraphina stepped in, trembling. The door shut behind her with a click. A mechanical slide, locking her in. The collar tugged as she sank to the floor. She didn't cry. She simply tucked herself into the corner where the wall met the cold stone, arms wrapped around her knees, chin on her shoulder. Her eyes stayed downcast, trained on the shadows cast by her own body. She blinked once, then again, and waited to disappear. Time passed without measurement. Later, how much later, she didn't know, the door opened again. She felt it before she heard it. The shift in air. The scent of something not firewood or steel, but colder, wilder, threaded with snow and pine sap. A footstep. Then another. She flinched when he came close. He didn't speak at first. Just stood there, watching. Then came the pressure. It wasn't his voice or his touch. It was the weight in the room, the way her body prickled with unease, a sixth sense screaming that something was wrong even if nothing yet moved. "You're smaller than I expected." The voice was deep. Controlled. Alaric Thorne had a way of speaking that cut, not because it was sharp, but because it refused to bend. Still, she didn't move. He circled once, slow and deliberate, as if she were something in a cage and he hadn't decided what to do with her. "I saw you on the platform," he said. "You were shaking like a rabbit, but you didn't scream. You didn't run." He stopped behind her. The scent of him crawled over her skin like frost. Her stomach tightened involuntarily. "Are you mute?" Silence. "Or are you just very well trained?" Her fingers twitched against her ankles. His hand reached out, hovered inches above her shoulder, but didn't make contact. Even that close, her skin recoiled. The sensation came again. A sudden high whine inside his skull, thin, shrill, like a child sobbing into a corner of his mind. It wasn't real. Couldn't be. Yet it pulled at something visceral, something animal. He blinked. She hadn't made a sound. And yet, he heard it. A phantom sob. An echo that wasn't his. Alaric stepped back. Interesting. He turned his head slightly. The chain on her collar shimmered in the torchlight. "Is this it, then?" he asked. "Your trick? You make the room feel like it's morning, and you think that's enough to draw pity." Still, she didn't look up. His patience thinned. "Answer me." Her lips parted slightly. Barely. But no words came out. His voice dropped, darker. "You're not helpless. You're playing a role. It's working on the guards, on the staff. But it won't work on me." He crouched in front of her. Their faces were close now. She could see the silver pin at his throat, the symbol of the White Fong bloodline. He smelled of ice water and smoke. "I don't like liars." Her breathing hitched. "I don't like being manipulated. And if you think looking pitiful will earn you anything, you're wrong." Then she did something. She flinched back, only an inch, no more, and in that moment, her mouth trembled open and she whispered, "Please, don't hit me." The words were so soft they barely existed. A ghost of sound. But they were real. Alaric froze. Something in his chest twisted. Unexpected. Ugly. He stood too fast. His vision blurred for a second as the phantom noise returned, this time louder, more insistent. A whimper threaded with something that felt like grief? He gritted his teeth. "You think that will stop me," he muttered. "You think acting afraid makes you safe." She shook her head quickly, once, twice, barely a movement, but it wasn't defiance. It was panic. Alaric turned sharply on his heel and walked out, slamming the door behind him hard enough to rattle the hinges. Outside in the corridor, he exhaled once. Just once. Behind him, the servant girl Nara stood with a bowl of water and clean linens she'd never been instructed to bring. "She hasn't eaten," Nara said quietly. Alaric didn't look at her. "Feed her," he said. "But don't speak to her." Nara hesitated. "Sir." He looked at her then. Sharp and cold. The girl dropped her eyes and fell to her knees. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to question you. Only." She swallowed. "You've never looked at any Omega like that before. I just thought." Her voice died in her throat. Alaric said nothing. He walked away. The door creaked open behind him again as Nara stepped in, trembling. Inside the room, Seraphina hadn't moved. She hadn't cried again. But as the servant knelt beside her, hands careful on the bowl, she heard something. The softest voice, as if the words had been waiting in the quiet all along. "He smelled it," Seraphina whispered, barely more than breath. Nara turned her head. "Smelled what?" Seraphina's eyes were open now, and they didn't look afraid. Just far away. "He smelled the mark." Chapter 3: Cold Rooms, Cold Wrists. The basin steamed faintly in the still air. Not that Seraphina felt the heat. The water might as well have been ice. Every drop that touched her skin stole a breath from her lungs, and she didn't have many to spare. She stood in the center of the cleansing chamber, stripped of everything but the collar around her throat. The iron chain had been unhooked, but the weight of it still dragged across her spine, as if it meant to remind her what she was. 2 attendants moved around her with clinical efficiency, women, neither cruel nor kind, trained to touch and not speak. They scrubbed her hair, lifted her arms, tilted her chin, bent her forward, turned her like a doll with limbs made for display. No one asked if she was cold. No one gave her a cloth. She shivered anyway. Her breath misted faintly in the air. One of the women moved behind her to scrub her back and paused. A breath hitched. "Fetch the priest," she said to the other. Seraphina flinched. Not from the words, but from the soft scraping of the woman's fingernail as it passed over the base of her neck, brushing a ridge of skin that tingled like a burn. She didn't need a mirror to know what they'd seen. She didn't want one. Within minutes, boots clicked across the floor, sharp and fast. Elian, the high priest of White Fong Hold, entered the room with the robes of his office trailing behind him. His eyes were sharp beneath the hood, ice blue and gleaming. "Where is it?" he asked. The attendant stepped aside. Elian circled slowly until he stood directly behind Seraphina. She didn't turn, didn't flinch. She only stood there, arms crossed over her bare chest, head bowed, wet hair trailing down her spine. Elian leaned in. His breath stirred the damp at her nape. He touched nothing, but the silence thickened as he stared. "A mark," he said finally. "Old. Subdermal. Not recent. Faint activation signature." The woman swallowed. It was glowing faintly. "Just before we called you." Elian clasped his hands behind his back. "Take her to the inner sanctum. The prince will want to see this himself." Seraphina made no sound as they threw a linen shift over her body and clipped the chain back to her collar. She only trembled. The room they brought her to this time was warmer, but not kind. White marble floors stretched beneath a silver-draped ceiling, and the hearth burned quietly at the far end, though no chair sat beside it. This was not a room meant for comfort. It was a chamber for judgment. Seraphina stood near the wall, her knees locked, eyes on the floor. When Alaric entered, the air changed. She felt it before she saw him. The scent of frost and wild pine. The weight of something inescapable pressing down on her shoulders like a second chain. He didn't speak at first. Just closed the door behind him and let the silence stretch. Then the steps. Measured. Even. She didn't lift her head. He stopped in front of her. His gloves were off. She saw the bare skin of his hands, the faint scars on his knuckles, the black ink of a sigil inked faintly into his right wrist. Alaric reached out slowly. His fingers brushed her nape. She jolted, barely, but he noticed. "Relax," he said coldly. "It's not pain. Not yet." He tilted her chin up. She didn't resist, but her eyes stayed down. Alaric pushed aside the wet curtain of hair and traced the faint curve of skin between her shoulder blades. There, just above the spine, was the mark. It wasn't raw. It wasn't new. But it was real. A sigil the size of a coin, pale silver against pale flesh, like moonlight etched into skin. At certain angles, it glowed softly, pulsing with something that felt sentient. He pressed 2 fingers against it. Seraphina gasped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But the sound escaped her lips like it hadn't asked permission. She immediately bit it back. Alaric narrowed his eyes. "You were marked," he said. "But not by me. Not by any alpha in this fortress." She said nothing. He leaned in closer, voice lowering. "So who?" Still nothing. He let his fingers rest there, just above the mark, as he pushed, not with touch, but with something deeper. His power. His presence. The first wave was subtle. A threat of command, the same he used to break unruly subordinates. The second was stronger. Mental pressure. Weight. A demand for submission that most Omegas felt in their bones. Seraphina didn't fall to her knees. But she swayed. Her hands clutched the fabric of her shift. Her shoulders hunched. Her jaw trembled. A sob built in her throat, silent and sharp, but she didn't voice it. The room grew colder. Alaric pressed harder. And then, something shifted. He felt it like a slap. Not resistance. Not rejection. But calm. Warmth. A soft pulse of emotional static surged from the mark beneath his hand. It wasn't an attack. It was a bomb. It spread through his fingers, up his arm, into his chest. And it made him pause. His head jerked back. "What the hell?" he whispered. His wolf, always caged beneath the skin, shuddered. He had intended to test her, to break her. But instead, her mark reached for him. Not to fight, to soothe. Alaric stepped back quickly, breath sharp. She was still crying. Barely. Silently. Her head lowered, shoulders shaking. But something in the room had changed. The predator in him had recoiled. Not from pain, but from the ache of something dangerously close to peace. No one calmed an alpha's madness. No Omega could do that. Not unless. His gaze snapped to her again. "You're not lying," he said, almost to himself. "You're not faking this." She said nothing. He stepped forward again, slower this time. His hand hovered at her throat. "You were born with this," he said. "A mark like this doesn't fade. It roots." She nodded. "Just once." He exhaled. Then leaned in, his mouth near her ear. "Then tell me, little Omega," he whispered. "Who bit you?" Her lips parted. A breath escaped. "I was born with it," she said quietly. "No one ever did." Alaric froze. For a moment, neither moved. Then he turned sharply and left without another word. Elsewhere, far below the fortress, in a chamber sealed with stone and moonlight, a priest ran his fingers across an ancient wall of runes. He stopped at one. A single sigil etched in silver. A wolf unbound by chains, its jaws open in silence. Below it, in forgotten ink, one name remained. The Unbound One. Chapter 4. She smells like moonflower. The night air inside White Fong Hold was still. Too still. Alaric sat upright in his bed, chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The fire in the hearth had long since died down, but he didn't notice. His sheets were tangled, damp with sweat. His jaw ached from clenching. His claws, half-shifted, scraped the edge of the mattress. Again. He dreamed of her again. Not in the way alpha males were supposed to dream of omegas, not with hunger, not with lust. No, his dreams were full of things that didn't belong to him. Things like crying. Like silence. Like a voice so soft it seemed to curl around his ribs and whisper directly into the marrow of his bones. He rubbed a hand over his face. The smell lingered. Not her perfume. She didn't wear any. Something else. Faint. Blooming. Familiar in a way that set his instincts on edge. Moonflower. It had no place in his chambers. No one was allowed to bring that scent into the sanctum. Not since the war. Not since the last one. And yet, the trace of it haunted the edges of every breath. He stood abruptly, dragging on a robe, boots left forgotten. He moved like someone possessed. Past the guards. Down the stone steps. Through the long, silent passage where the wind never reached. Every footstep echoed, and yet he felt like he was being drawn toward something quieter than silence itself. He stopped outside her door. She hadn't been moved from the low-quarter wing, despite her mark. Despite the effect she'd already had on the priests, the guards, the damn air itself. He told himself it was caution. He told himself she wasn't dangerous. But he was lying. Alaric stood there for a long time. There was no sound from inside. Not at first. Then, faint, too faint, came the sound of soft, uneven breathing. Almost a whimper. The kind of sound a creature makes when it's trying not to be heard, when it's breaking. And he felt it. The pressure in his skull, the ache in his chest, all of it eased. His heartbeat slowed. That should have terrified him. He reached for the door. It wasn't locked. He hadn't ordered it locked. Had he? The handle turned. The door creaked open. The scent hit him like a blade to the ribs. Moonflower. Sweet and cold and heavy with some unplaceable ache. It wasn't sprayed. It wasn't worn. It was her. Seraphina was asleep. Curled into the corner of the narrow bed, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around herself like she could hold in the trembling. Her shift was slightly twisted, clinging to her skin. One pale ankle peeked from under the hem, too thin, too still. She wasn't crying now, but her scent was. Alaric stepped into the room before he realized it. And that was his first mistake. The second was letting himself get closer. He hadn't meant to kneel beside her bed. He hadn't meant to reach out, to brush back a strand of hair clinging to her cheek. He certainly hadn't meant to breathe her in. But he did. And everything fractured. It wasn't just his thoughts. It wasn't just the sharp tug of something feral in his gut, or the sudden, violent throb of his canines lengthening in his mouth. It was his mind. His control. Her scent didn't lure, it bound. A pulse, spiritual, undeniable, rushed through the room. His knees hit the stone. His hands slammed to the floor, claws gouging the edges of her cot. Heat. Pressure. Pain. He roared. It wasn't a human sound. His body twisted, bones cracking, skin shifting. Fur burst along his spine. His mouth split wider than it should have. Fangs bared, lips peeled back in a snarl. His wolf surged forward like it had been waiting for permission to break free. Seraphina screamed. Not loud, not piercing, but sharp and terrified, her body recoiling, back pressed to the wall behind her. She wasn't meant to see him like this. He hadn't even marked her. And yet her presence, her scent, had done what no battle, no rival, no injury ever could. She'd unmade him. The wolf backed away, pacing, shuddering, eyes glowing. But she didn't move. Couldn't. She was still crying. It wasn't the sound that undid him. It was the look. Tears streaming silently down her face, lips parted, shoulders trembling. She didn't beg. She didn't run. She just shook her head over and over as if trying to wake from something too terrible to be real. Alaric forced the shift back. His bones screamed. His muscles tore and stitched. He staggered to his feet, panting, staring at her. The scent still clung to the air. His throat burned. He wanted. No, not want. Need. To bite. To mark. To bury himself in the thing that brought peace to the storm. But she looked like she'd rather die. And he. He was already damned. Leave her, came a voice from the doorway. Elian. Alaric didn't turn. She calms it, Alaric whispered. It stops when I'm near her. Elian stepped closer. He bowed his head, respectfully, but his words were careful. Then don't be near her. Alaric's jaw clenched. He looked back at Seraphina. She was watching him now. Not cowering. Not pleading. Just watching. Like she expected him to lose again. He didn't. Alaric pulled the door shut behind him with shaking hands. He walked the hallway in silence. Only when he reached the far end did he exhale, and when he did, it was as if the scent followed him. Moonflower. Moonlight. Omega. She wasn't ordinary. She wasn't broken. She was a flaw in the foundation of everything he believed. A curse wrapped in soft skin and silence. Seraphina remained curled on her bed, breathing shallowly. Her tears had stopped. But her thoughts hadn't. When she closed her eyes, she still saw him, his shadow shifting, his hands trembling, the look in his eyes right before they turned gold. She should have fainted. She should have screamed. Instead, she had asked herself a question she wasn't ready to answer. Because when he knelt beside her, when he looked at her like that, she hadn't wanted to run. Not really. And that terrified her more than his teeth ever could. Later, in the empty sanctum, Alaric stared at his bloodied hands and whispered, "You're not a normal Omega." And across the wind, across the bond that had no name, her whisper came back, "Then why do you still want to bite me?" Chapter 5. Bite her or break her. The chamber was colder than usual. Colder than it had any right to be with that many alphas in one room. Stone walls lined with banners depicting generations of power, all of it watching silently as Alaric stood in the center of the ring. Above him, the elders sat like carved obsidian. Below them, Judgment brewed like a storm barely held in check. "She smells like moonflower," one of them said flatly, voice sharp and aged. "And yet you deny marking her." "I did not," Alaric answered, each word clipped and measured. "She was found sobbing in your chamber. And you," another added, nostrils flaring, "were reported to have lost your shape. Shifted fully. On instinct. In proximity to an unmarked omega." "I did not bite her," Alaric said again. Elian stood a step behind him, robe stiff with ritual oils, face unreadable. But even he did not offer defense. The room reeked of suspicion. And beneath it, that scent lingered. Faint. Invasive. Blooming where it shouldn't. "She smells like prophecy," one of the priest judges muttered. "And yet we have no record. No permission. No order." "That is because she was not chosen," Alaric snapped, the words hotter than intended. The silence that followed was a blade. "She wasn't chosen," the oldest elder said slowly, "and yet she's yours." Alaric didn't flinch. But inside him, something twisted. They brought her to the spirit room. A chamber carved into the highest point of the fortress, where walls gleamed with embedded silver runes. No escape. No lies. Nothing but truth and agony. Seraphina was silent as they led her in. Her wrists were already trembling. She didn't ask where they were going. Didn't protest when they fastened the silver bands to her arms, her throat, her ankles. The pole at the center glowed faintly, an ancient relic once used for traders. It amplified mental resonance, dragged it to the surface. She'd seen drawings of it in the archives. She never thought she'd feel it press cold against her back. "Let me speak to her alone," Alaric said quietly. "She's not yours to soothe," came the answer. "They meant to break her. And they wanted him to do it." He stood across from her, hands clenched. His voice was low. "This will hurt." She raised her head. Tears already welled in her eyes, but she nodded once. Not in consent, just in understanding. "Don't touch me," she whispered. "I won't." But his voice betrayed him. And so did the bond. When the trial began, she was still breathing steadily. But the moment the link ignited between them, when the tether of Alpha to Omega sparked and pushed and pulled, she cried out. Not in pain. In betrayal. It wasn't his doing. Not entirely. The chamber's silver spike forced his mental signature to press harder, deeper, inside her. He tried to pull back. But the moment she felt him, in her head, her mouth opened in a sob so raw it flayed him. "Don't," she begged. "I'm trying not to," he growled, sweat beading along his spine. The scent of moonflower overwhelmed the room. Uncontrolled. Radiant. Her fear pouring into the air like a mist. She writhed against the pole. Not to entice. Never that. She was trying to escape. But to the bond, it looked like invitation. And to the Alphas watching, it looked like submission. Alaric's knees buckled. His body fought itself, part of him drawn, snarling, aching to soothe the tear-streaked girl bound in silver, the other side raging against the violence of what they were forcing between them. "I won't hurt you," he ground out. But the bond didn't care. Her broken gasps fed it. Her tears nourished it. And his control thinned until he was gripping his own forearm, claws digging deep into flesh, trying to hold himself back. Somewhere across the chamber, someone laughed. A soft, low sound. Unexpected. Uninvited. Cashin leaned against the open archway, one boot braced against the stone, arms folded lazily. A predator at ease. He had come in without sound. No one had stopped him. No one ever did. His crimson eyes flicked from Seraphina's trembling form to the silver pole, to Alaric's hunched figure, then back to her again. "She cries so prettily," Cashin murmured, almost to himself. Like something sacred being shattered. Elian turned sharply. "This is a closed chamber." Cashin only smiled. "I smelled her," he said. "All the way from the outer gate. Had to see if it was true." Alaric's growl was guttural. "She's not yours." Cashin shrugged. stepping forward into the light. Isn't she? His gaze dropped to the girl trembling beneath silver bindings, chest heaving, wrists red with strain. She's not bonded, he said. She's not marked. She's not even claimed. Yet you bring her here. Make her cry. Force her to feel you. Cashin's smile was not kind. Seems cruel. Alaric lunged. Elian caught his arm just before it reached the intruder's throat. She isn't stable, the priest warned sharply. If you lose control now. Cashin didn't move. He only looked at Seraphina. And something in his smile softened, dangerously. You're the moonflower, he whispered. Aren't you? She didn't respond. Her eyes were closed. Her body shook. But her scent, gods, it bloomed again, wild and unfiltered. Cashin inhaled like a man at the altar. You're my new favorite thing, he said softly. Alaric broke free of Elian's grip and moved to shield her body from view. Cashin laughed once, then turned and walked out, boots echoing against the stone floor. Later, after the room emptied and Seraphina was released, limp and bruised and silent, Alaric sat beside her on the terrace. He didn't speak. He didn't reach for her. She didn't look at him. Her voice was thin when it came. You said you wouldn't hurt me. I didn't touch you. She turned then. Her eyes met his. You didn't have to. He swallowed. She leaned forward, voice shaking. Whatever this is, she said, whatever you think you feel, it's not love. It's not even want. He said nothing. It's power, she whispered. And I'm the one bleeding for it. Far below the terrace, in the shadows of the lower court, Cashin watched the light flickering through the tower window. She was still awake. He could feel it. He imagined her trembling again. Imagined the sound of her crying. Stop, she had whispered. Please. He'd never liked prey that went quiet. But this one? This one begged. This one broke. And he hadn't even touched her yet. He licked his lips. Little moonflower, he murmured. I'm going to ruin you. Chapter 6, The Silent Omega. The room smelled like torn silk and moonlight. The drapes had been drawn shut for days. The candle on the far table had melted into a warped puddle. And on the edge of the bed, Seraphina sat in silence, the shredded remains of her nightgown clenched in her fists. Nara had tried everything. Warm broth, lavender oil, stories whispered from childhood. Nothing had worked. Seraphina, she said gently again, kneeling beside her. Please. Just look at me. But the girl did not move. Did not blink. Only stared out the narrow slit of window, unmoving as a porcelain doll left in a storm. You'll get sick, Nara whispered, brushing a piece of hair from her shoulder. If you don't sleep. If you don't speak. A knock interrupted them. Not harsh. Not angry. But heavy. Alpha heavy. Nara stood quickly, smoothing her apron. I'll tell him you're unwell, she said, and Seraphina didn't flinch. Didn't answer. Didn't even turn when the door creaked open. Leave us, Alaric said quietly. But she. Now. Nara bowed and fled. The silence that followed was unbearable. Alaric stayed near the door at first, not daring to approach. He could feel the echoes of the spirit chamber still in her skin, the way her scent recoiled from him, even across the room. She didn't acknowledge his presence. She just sat there, bare feet against the cold stone floor, fingers gripping the torn fabric like it was the only thing tethering her to herself. I didn't want it to happen that way, he said, voice low. Still, she said nothing. I asked them to delay the trial. They wouldn't listen. Nothing. Not even the twitch of her spine. I tried not to touch your mind. That, at least, earned him a reaction. She curled tighter around the fabric. Her knuckles whitened. Her breath caught. A stifled sound. Not quite a sob. Not yet. Alaric took a step forward, then stopped. Please, he murmured. Just look at me. She didn't. She only clutched the ruined nightgown closer, burying her face in the silk and shaking silently. He couldn't bear it. He turned away and left without another word. The next time someone came, It was not the one anyone expected. She smelled him before she saw him. Not like Alaric, who always brought with him the heavy heat of restraint and duty, but something wilder. Earth after lightning. Smoke tinged with something sweet. The window opened. A shadow slipped inside. Moonlight revealed the bouquet first, pale blue blossoms bound in a crimson ribbon. Moonflower. He laid it on her pillow without a sound, then leaned lazily against the wall. Cashin. She didn't scream. Couldn't. Her breath hitched, and she flinched away from the bed, eyes wide. He held up both hands, amused. Not here to touch, little bloom. His voice was soft. Coaxing. Almost kind. She stared. He stared back. I was curious, he said simply. Had to see what made the golden alpha sweat like a hound. She backed toward the far wall, her hand behind her, grasping the windowsill like it might keep her tethered. Cashin tilted his head. Still not speaking? He asked. That's fine. I like them quiet. She shook her head, small, desperate. Not an answer. Just no. To everything. He moved closer. Not fast, but deliberate. Each step radiated a predator's ease. She pressed herself flat against the wall, breath coming too fast, too thin. He stopped a foot away, close enough for her to see the smirk in his eyes. He didn't touch her. Didn't need to. Scared, he whispered. She trembled. His grin widened. Good. He reached into his coat and pulled out a single petal. Pressed it to his tongue. Sucked the taste. Moonflower reacts strongest to longing, you know, he murmured. You must be drenched in it. She gasped. And the door burst open. Alaric. His scent exploded into the room like thunderclouds. What the hell are you doing here? He growled. Cashin turned, slow and unbothered. Leaving a gift. You entered the high tower without permission. I used the old tunnels, Cashin said easily. You should block them better. Alaric's eyes glowed gold. He strode forward, shoving Cashin away from her. Cashin only laughed. Careful. You'll bruise me, Prince. Get out. Is that an order or jealousy? Alaric's fist landed squarely in his jaw. The force knocked Cashin against the wall. But he was grinning as blood trickled down his lip. You really do want her, he said, wiping his mouth. Poor thing. No wonder she's gone mute. Alaric's body shuddered with fury. His claws unsheathed. Cashin only licked the blood. Try again, he whispered. This time, Alaric lunged with intent to kill. But before their bodies collided, Seraphina screamed. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Don't, she sobbed. Please don't fight, don't. Her voice cracked like ice on the brink of collapse. Both alphas stopped. The room spun. And then the mental field shattered. Her sobs triggered something primal. The walls pulsed with power. The floor cracked beneath their feet. A ripple of silver light surged through the stones, forcing both men to their knees. Cashin clutched his temple, laughing through the pain. Well, damn. Alaric reached her first. She was still crying, curled in on herself, fists pressed to her temples. He didn't ask permission. Didn't wait. He swept her up into his arms, cradling her against his chest like something sacred. She sobbed into his collarbone, fists weakly beating his chest. I told you, she whispered brokenly. Don't touch, don't. I'm not letting go, he said, voice hoarse. You're hurting me. I know. She cried harder. And still, he held her. Tighter. Cashin staggered to his feet, blood still on his chin, and met Alaric's eyes across the room. Downright possessive, aren't we? He drawled. Alaric said nothing, only shifted Seraphina higher in his arms, covering her shaking frame with his coat. Cashin smirked and walked toward the door, but not before pausing in the threshold. You can lock up her body, he said quietly, but in her dreams? He looked at Seraphina. She calls for me. Alaric didn't move, didn't blink, only lowered his head and whispered into her hair. I'll silence every dream you bleed for, little one, he said. But she didn't hear him. She'd already passed out. Chapter 7. the trial of heat. They brought her into the spiral court barefoot. The floor, cut from obsidian and silver root, stung like frostbite. The concentric rings of the observation tiers climbed above her like rows of judgmental eyes, white-robed elders, alpha witnesses, advisors of blood and rank, all seated as if this were a sacred ritual and not a spectacle of violation. Seraphina's hands were bound in front of her. Her gown was white. Too white. Unmarked. A cloth meant to stain. She didn't lift her head. She didn't meet their eyes. She won't even walk properly, someone muttered. She hasn't spoken in days, another replied. Might be broken already. They led her into the center of the court, where a polished ring of marble marked the testing circle. Her knees hit stone with a dull crack. She didn't flinch. Alaric was already there. He stood to the side, flanked by the council, white-haired elders with ceremonial staves and gold-threaded cuffs. His jaw was locked. His coat was too formal, too tight. His hands, gloved, curled into fists. He hadn't looked at her since they brought her in. Not directly. She is to undergo the trial of heat, intoned Elder Hark, voice carrying through the chamber like cold smoke. To assess whether the subject is viable under Omega law, she will be exposed to graduated alpha provocation and observed for physiological and neurological responses. Any interference will be deemed a breach of treaty law. The crowd did not murmur. They roared. Laughter. Cheers. Put her under, someone yelled. Let's see if she even has a cycle. Bet she dries up like a salted rat. A few alpha males stood closer to the edge of the circle, already adjusting the collars of their uniforms, rolling their shoulders like athletes before a match. First stimulus. Passive scent exposure. The guards unlocked the gate. A young alpha stepped into the ring, smirking. His scent hit the air like citrus and iron, sharp, invasive, artificial. Seraphina didn't move. Not a twitch. He circled her, trailing closer, until he knelt and exhaled directly behind her ear. She didn't blink. Second stimulus. Proximity. The next alpha came in with slower steps. This one knelt in front of her, exuding a heavier musk, dominant, oily, reeking of performance. He reached forward and brushed her hair from her face. Her eyes remained dead. He lifted her chin. Her head lolled back like a puppet, but her gaze didn't focus. She's like a corpse, he muttered. Another wave of laughter. Third stimulus. Skin contact. No, Alaric growled. Elder Hark didn't even glance at him. It is written. A third alpha was summoned. Older. Rougher. His scent filled the air like smoke in a tomb. He approached her from behind. Secure the collar, one of the attendants said. Seraphina's dress was unfastened at the neck with a jerk. The fabric yawned open, bearing her nape to the court. Her scent remained unchanged. Flat. Empty. But her body tensed. Not in fear. Not in response. But in refusal. She curled forward, burying her face in her own hands, like she wanted to disappear. She's useless, the rough alpha snarled, gripping her arm and pulling her upright. There's nothing in her. She's an ice corpse. Proceed to fourth. No, Alaric said, louder. The attendants ignored him. The alpha shoved Seraphina back onto her knees and pressed his hand to the back of her neck. That's when she made a sound. It wasn't loud. Just a thread of breath, caught halfway between inhale and sob. A dying thing. A whisper of pain. But it broke something. In her. And in him. Alaric's power lashed out without warning. The air shattered like crystal. The floor cracked in a spiderweb beneath his boots. Gold light flickered from his chest, his king's mark flaring in full pulse. The circle rippled with raw energy, knocking the alphas off their feet. Enough, he roared. The court erupted in chaos. Spectators scrambled. Council guards bristled, weapons half drawn. She's not a toy, Alaric shouted. You don't get to prod her like cattle. You're breaching the trial laws, a voice called. I don't care. He strode into the circle and dropped to his knees beside her. She was trembling, not with fear, with cold, with shame, with something too deep to name. He touched her shoulder gently. She flinched, and yet she leaned. Just barely. Her forehead fell against his chest. Her fingers, bound, brushed his coat. "Stop looking at her," he growled to the onlookers. "Turn your eyes away." But they didn't. Not until he lifted his hand and the air pulsed again, this time with command. An Alpha King's command. They obeyed. Silently. Sullenly. One by one, the circle emptied. The elders conferred, rattled. Whispers of annulment, of political fallout, of sealing the records. Seraphina didn't move again until the hall was cleared. She remained limp in his arms, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Alaric looked down at her and said, brokenly, "You didn't even try to stop them." Her lips moved. No sound came. "I would have torn the whole court apart if they touched you again." Still, she didn't speak. They gave her a room without guards. Not a comfort. A containment. She lay curled on the cold floor, blankets ignored. Hours passed. The world was silent. Then, from the mark behind her neck, a tear formed. Not hers. A single drop of opalescent liquid, like moonlight, slipped from the crescent of the claim. She didn't notice. She was already dreaming. In the dark, her mouth parted. "Help me," she whispered. Across the tower, Alaric woke with a gasp. He was on the floor, knees bruised, hands trembling. His mark throbbed with heat. His breath came too fast. "She's calling me," he whispered. He pressed his palms to his eyes and didn't move. Chapter 8: The Crown That Shouldn't Feel. It had been 3 days since the trial. 3 days since Alaric had spoken to anyone. The high tower was sealed. No one entered. No one dared. From behind the golden-wrought doors of his bedchamber, only the occasional crack of shattering glass or the low pulse of psychic tremors broke the silence. The guards standing post below the archways stood with clenched jaws, their eyes darting with the unspoken truth. The Alpha King was unraveling. He had not left the room. Not to eat. Not to speak. Not even to scream. They said his mark glowed at night, hot enough to leave blisters beneath the collar of his shirt. That the scent of his spiraling mental domain bled into the marble walls, charcoal, iron, blood, and something sweeter, like sorrow steeped in crushed lavender. On the 3rd night, the council panicked. "Summon the priest," one muttered. "Bring his Omega," said another. The girl. The thing. Seraphina. She didn't flinch when they came for her. Didn't ask questions when the temple's shadow-robed Elian led her down the winding staircase of the spiral tower and into the moonlit hush of the king's floor. She was barefoot again. Always barefoot, like they meant for her skin to remember pain. "She will stand at the threshold," the priest instructed. "Not a step further." "She's not trained," a guard warned. "She might trigger another surge." "She is the surge," Elian said. "Or the salve." The doors creaked open. Alaric was inside, curled on the floor near the far wall, his back to the moonlit bed. The air was thick with static. It clung to the lungs like ash. He didn't look up. Not when the doors opened. Not when her shadow spilled into the chamber. Only when her breath caught, quiet and unintentional, did he shift. Just a twitch. Like an old scar remembering the blade. "Don't move," he whispered, voice raw. She didn't. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes were wild, red-rimmed, sleepless, fevered. And yet, the second he saw her, something inside him stilled. Like snow after a storm. He stood with effort, chest rising and falling too fast. "Why did they send you?" She didn't answer. His laugh was bitter. "You're mute now? Or playing soft again?" He came closer, barefoot like her, steps echoing against the stone floor. His shirt was undone at the throat, revealing the bloodied bandages wrapped around his ribs. "I can't sleep," he muttered. "I can't breathe." He circled her. "I dream of your voice. Of your silence. Of the way you didn't cry when his words broke off. You weren't even afraid. Her hands remained folded in front of her, trembling slightly. You want something, don't you? He asked. Is that it? Playing the fragile little martyr, so I'll mark you? Is that it, Omega? Still nothing. He growled, and grabbed her by the chin. Say it, he snarled. Tell me what you want. Her eyes fluttered closed. Her voice, when it came, was so quiet it barely broke the air. I don't want to live, she said. I just don't want it to hurt. The words hit him like a blow. His hand dropped. The sound of his breath shuddered through the room. He stepped back, then collapsed to his knees in front of her. Not as a king. Not even as an alpha. But as a man breaking. He leaned forward until his forehead pressed against her bare shoulder, the fabric of her thin gown already slipping to the crook of her arm. You're driving me mad, he whispered. And still She stood motionless. His hands slid to her waist, trembling. His mouth brushed her neck, warm breath stirring the loose strands of her hair. You smell like nothing, he whispered. But you feel like everything. He turned her, slowly, carefully, until her back was to the wall. His fingers found the ribbon at the collar of her gown. It came undone with a sigh. The fabric slipped. Not forced. Not claimed. Just fell, exposing the nape of her neck, the curve of her shoulder, the place where his teeth could anchor and his scent could burn into her skin forever. He stared at it. And did not bite. His lips hovered over the mark. His breath stuttered. She didn't move. He pressed his mouth there, not to claim, but to confess. Then dropped his head to her chest and exhaled like it would tear him in two. She raised her hand, just slightly, and let her fingers brush his hair. Not affection. Not surrender. Just human touch. He kissed her collarbone once. And let her go. He rose, slowly, and stepped away, his gaze unreadable. I don't believe in fated mates, he said. I don't believe in bonds or divine threads or promises written into flesh. His voice dropped, almost tender. But I still think I want you to die in my arms. The silence stretched. Then he turned away. She didn't speak again. She left as she came, barefoot, quiet, untouched in ways that still made him bleed. Outside the high tower, Cashin leaned against the palace terrace, arms folded, eyes on the flickering torches that lined the windows of the king's chambers. He watched the girl vanish back into shadow, and muttered, low and bitter, You don't deserve her tears. Chapter 9, Cashin's Blood Oath. The chaos in the palace was the perfect veil. Smoke still curled along the southern wings where the council guards had clashed with the temple enforcers. No one noticed the silent figure that moved through the garden wall's breach, cloaked in dusk, silent as frost. Cashin didn't look back. Seraphina lay slumped over his shoulder, unmoving. She hadn't screamed. Not when the scent of wolf's bane paralyzed her limbs. Not when her fragile body was wrapped in a black cloak and lifted like a stolen relic. Not even when the northern wind bit at her skin, or when her bare feet brushed over the saddle horn as he mounted. The ride north was brutal. The moon above the borderlands was a cold, bruised smear. Below it, the wolves howled not in warning, but in recognition. They knew his scent. Cashin had been theirs once, before his name turned to ash in the king's mouth. Now he returned with a prize. No, a vow. They reached the shrine before dawn. A ruin carved from ancient bone and bleached stone, hollowed by time, half buried in dust and snow. The northern ruin shrine, last altar of the first bloodline. The place where the wild alphas once pledged themselves with fangs, not rings. He dismounted with Seraphina in his arms. Her body stirred, limp and weightless, like a half-dead moth. Cashin laid her before the old altar. The stone beneath her was cracked, but still bore the spiral glyph of the wolf god's eye. She blinked slowly. Her lips were pale. Where? Far from him, Cashin murmured. Far enough that he can't smell you cry. Her brows twitched at that. But she didn't move. He knelt beside her, pulling a blade from his belt. Not to threaten, this was no execution. He sliced his palm open and let the blood drip across the altar's spiral, whispering the ancient words. I offer oath not to the crown, he said, but to the flame I stole from its throat. His blood hissed against the stone. Seraphina stared at him, her eyes no longer empty, but wounded. You brought me here to kill me? She whispered. No, he said. To keep you. He reached for her. She flinched. His voice tightened. I won't hurt you. Not unless you beg me to. She shook her head, barely perceptible. Cashin's hand hovered over her shoulder, then brushed aside the collar of her robe. The curve of her neck was pale, untouched almost. Except it wasn't. Not truly. He leaned in, lips parted, fangs dragging just above the skin. And then, a flash of heat. A scream not hers, but his. Cashin recoiled, staggering back with a guttural snarl. Something had bitten him, not flesh, but spirit. He clutched his head, eyes wild. What? Seraphina sat up, breathing shallow, lips trembling. You can't, she whispered. He's still inside me. Cashin's hand burned where it had touched her mark. His fingers smoked, faintly. The psychic backlash hadn't just wounded him, it had rejected him. His fury surged. You let him brand you, he spat. Even if he didn't bite, he made you his. No, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't let him. I didn't ask for any of this. Tears slid down her cheeks then. Real ones. Shaking. Quiet. I thought you weren't like him, she whispered. That undid him. More than the pain. More than the failed mark. Cashin stared at her. And then, slowly, impossibly, he sank to his knees. Not like a king. Not like a lover. Like something broken. He reached out and took her ankle in his bloodied hand. Bowed his head. Kissed the arch of her foot as if it were a relic. I wasn't like him, he said softly. But now I'm worse. Her breath hitched. You make me a mad dog, Seraphina. She sobbed. He didn't rise. Didn't touch her again. The wind howled through the ruin. The shrine pulsed with ancient silence. When dawn finally broke, he carried her back. Wrapped in his cloak, half asleep from exhaustion and shock, Seraphina didn't fight. Cashin didn't say a word when he reached the western gate of the palace. He merely laid her gently down at the base of the steps, kissed her cold fingers once, and whispered to the approaching guards, She's not yours anymore. Then vanished into shadow. Alaric didn't speak as he arrived. He should have raged. Should have demanded blood. But when he saw her lying there, limbs folded inward, eyes glazed and unfocused, he only knelt. His hands trembled as he touched her cheek. Seraphina, he said hoarsely. She didn't wake. He gathered her into his arms. She weighed nothing. Then his pupils dilated. The scent hit him. Not blood. Not fear. But him. Cashin. Faint, like smoke after fire. Embedded in her mark. It wasn't a claim. Not fully. But it was there. A ghost of intent. A promise half-spoken. Alaric's jaw locked. And deep inside Seraphina's still silent mind, two alpha echoes clashed like storms. Chapter 10, Two Alphas, One Scar. The scent of her pain infected everything. Whitefang's throne room, once a hallowed hall of order, now thrummed with chaos barely restrained. High above, the ancient sigils carved into ivory walls glowed faintly, not with honor, but warning. Seraphina stood barefoot before the elder's circle, arms hanging limp, gown too loose on her fragile frame. Her head hung low, but not in defiance. Only in grief. Look at her, one elder murmured. She reeks of both, another spat. This is an abomination. She cannot carry two alpha signatures without consequence. The elders' voices rose like knives, but Seraphina didn't flinch. Her neck, once unmarked, now bore what should have been impossible. On the left, a pale shimmer threaded with winter frost. Alaric. On the right, a phantom glow laced with ash and blood. Cashin. Two alphas. One body. one silent omega. Alaric stood behind her, arms rigid at his sides, his control visibly eroding. Cashin leaned against a marble pillar, head tilted like he was bored, but his golden eyes tracked every twitch of Seraphina's hands. They hadn't spoken. Not to each other. Not since that night. The eldest elder raised his staff, striking the floor once. "Seraphina," he said, "you will speak." She didn't. "You must choose," he continued, slow and thunderous. "If not, we will choose for you." Still nothing. Her lips parted once. No sound came. Tears fell instead. The scent of them, raw salt, devastation, something more intimate than any scream, rippled through the psychic field. A growl rose. "Alaric." He stepped forward, fists clenched. "She's not capable of choosing right now." Cashin laughed. "You mean she's not capable of choosing you? You trespassed her mark. And you caged her first. She was mine." "She was herself," Cashin cut in, voice sharp. "Until you bled that out of her." Seraphina swayed. The psychic pressure built around her, invisible claws pulling her from both sides. Her breath came in shallow, erratic bursts, hands trembling at her sides. "I can't," she whispered. "Please, I—" The moment she spoke, both alphas moved. Alaric surged toward her. Cashin did the same. They didn't touch her, not physically. But their spirit fields collided with hers, silent, feral, electric. White light burst through the room as the spirit nexus activated. Too late to stop it. She was falling. Not through air. Through them. Through the clawing, molten storm of them. Alaric's signature hit first, cold, controlled, precise. It wrapped her spine like ice chains, demanding stillness. Cashin's came next, wild, fever-hot, like smoke on fire, licking every nerve she didn't know she had. And in the middle was her. Seraphina. Torn. The twin bonds weren't supposed to coexist. It wasn't mating. It was consumption. They didn't want her body. They wanted the part of her that could still break. She screamed, but no sound came. Inside, the resonance turned violent. She felt their rage seep into her ribs, into her skin. One heartbeat to the next, she was burning. No freezing. No shattering. A vision, not real, flickered in her mind's eye. Two mouths pressed to either side of her throat, not biting but waiting, fangs poised, breath molten. Her neck arched involuntarily, caught in a place that didn't exist, a fevered dream of submission that wasn't asked but expected. Their hands overlapped at her waist, forcing her upright while her knees buckled. Her head lolled back. And then, darkness. The spirit nexus snapped shut with a concussive thud. Seraphina collapsed. Cashin reached first, catching her before her skull struck stone. His hands shook. Not from strain, but from the echo still ricocheting through his chest. He looked down at her face, flushed, unconscious, mouth parted like she'd been crying out, and whispered something unintelligible. Alaric stood above them, jaw tight, eyes shadowed. "She needs medical care," one of the guards said from afar. No one answered. In the healer's chamber, the room smelled of crushed herbs and sterile fear. Seraphina lay beneath silk sheets, unmoving. Her breathing shallow, her skin too hot. A senior physician leaned back with a pale face. The double resonance nearly ruptured her gland. If this continues, she'll enter an irreversible heat. No one dared look at the two alphas. But everyone knew. Only a mate could stabilize such a condition. And two non-bonded marks meant no one could stabilize her. Alaric dismissed the room. Only once the door shut did he sink beside her bed. His hand hovered over her wrist, but didn't touch. Her skin was pink where Cashin's mark had tried to root, and paler still where his own had failed to seal. Neither had succeeded. Neither had earned her. He didn't know what it meant anymore. Only that she looked smaller now. As if whatever she'd been holding back had finally spilled and taken pieces of her with it. Her lips moved faintly in sleep. He leaned closer, breath uneven. "If I don't bite you," he whispered, "he will." She didn't stir. But a single tear slid sideways down her cheek, disappearing into the pillow's edge. He watched it vanish like a confession he could never undo. And stayed there, watching her burn. Chapter 11: The Fevered Bond. The fever came like a secret fire. At first, it was only a flicker, an ache behind her eyes, a dampness in her palms. But as night drowned Whitefang in silence, Seraphina curled beneath her sheets with skin that pulsed like embers. Her breaths turned shallow. Her thighs clenched involuntarily. A whimper slipped free, too soft to echo, too raw to silence. She didn't know what was happening to her. Or perhaps she did. Her body had learned what it wasn't supposed to know. Now it demanded, pleaded, burned. The dream came on the fever's heels. Stone walls, slick with old memory. The scent of frost wind and scorched pine. A room she'd never seen before, yet her soul recognized it instantly. The forbidden chamber of marks. A place of rituals. Of endings and beginnings. Of wolves who sealed their fates in blood. She stood in the center, wearing nothing but her own trembling skin. A silver thread cut through the air. Then Alaric. His presence was a chill wrapped in restraint. He stepped from the shadows, his eyes dark with something far deeper than hunger. He didn't speak. He only looked at her. And she wanted to cry. Her knees gave out. Before she could hit the ground, he caught her. Not with hands. With spirit. The bond flared between them, not sealed, not claimed, but waiting. A tether pulled tight. She collapsed into his chest, body racked with sobs. Her fevered skin scorched his spirit's edge. "I'm burning," she gasped. "Alaric, I can't." "I know," he whispered, voice shredded with control. "I'm here." She gripped his shoulders, fingernails digging into phantom flesh. The heat throbbed between her legs, behind her ribs, beneath her tongue. She didn't want to beg. But her body moved on its own, searching for friction, for pressure, for... His breath caught. Her lips brushed his collarbone. "Don't mark me," she choked. "Please don't." His whole form stilled. "I won't," he said, softer than a vow. "Not unless you ask." But then the dream twisted. A crack split the chamber's wall. Smoke coiled inward, glowing red. Another presence spilled in like oil. Cashin. He didn't walk. He appeared, his spirit slicing through theirs like a hot blade. Red fire, laughing teeth, desire coiled too tight. His voice didn't come from his mouth, it came from everywhere. "You left the door open, little dove," he purred. "Or maybe, part of you wanted me to find you." Alaric's body arched, as if struck. His grip on her tightened. "Get out," he growled. Cashin smiled and stepped closer. "I came to help," he said, kneeling beside them. "She's suffering. Isn't that what you're afraid of, Alaric? That your restraint is hurting her more than it's saving her?" "Don't," Alaric began. But Seraphina moaned. Both froze. It wasn't a moan of pleasure. It was a moan of pain. Her whole body convulsed in their shared dream. A shudder from root to crown. Her thighs trembled, her chest arched. She looked like she was being torn apart by something no hands could touch. Cashin reached for her throat. Alaric blocked him. But in this realm, there were no rules. Cashin's spirit slipped beneath Alaric's hand and licked her mark. Seraphina screamed. The sound was so real, it broke the dream's boundaries. In the waking world, her body thrashed against sweat-drenched sheets, mouth open in a cry no one could answer. Her skin burned with impossible heat. Her nails ripped the fabric beneath her. Her eyes rolled back. Back in the dream, she clawed at both of them. "I can't take it, please someone stop." Alaric held her close, burying his face in her neck. "You're safe," he breathed. "You're not alone." Cashin crouched lower, his mouth brushing her navel, then the curve of her hip. "You smell like you want to be claimed." "I don't," she sobbed. "I don't." "Then why are you shaking like this?" She opened her eyes. One arm reached toward Alaric. The other curled toward Cashin. Torn. Cashin looked at Alaric with a snarl. She'll never say your name when she comes. You're not going to break her, Alaric hissed. Not like this. She's already breaking herself. Their spirit auras collided, locking horns inside her. Seraphina's body twisted. Her neck arched, baring her unbitten gland. Her lips parted in a soundless, helpless cry. Her limbs seized with every pulse of heat, until suddenly, with a ragged breath, she stopped moving, frozen. Then, with eyes shining from tears and fever, she whispered, "If one of you marks me, I'll never belong to myself again." Silence. "If you do, I'd rather die." Alaric's hold faltered. He let go. Cashin's smile didn't fade. Instead, he leaned closer, brushing her temple with his phantom lips. "Then let's gamble," he murmured. "Let's see who you scream for." She tried to speak. No sound. Only tears. Only need. In the real world, her fever peaked. Her body twisted against the mattress, sweat plastering her hair to her face. Between her legs, slick warmth pooled, scenting the room with a desperation no doctor could cure. She moaned again, longer, lower. Her hand reached out blindly. No one was there. She collapsed into unconsciousness. Somewhere else, two alphas woke in different chambers, breathless, fists clenched, their hearts pulsing with a need that wasn't entirely their own. Neither of them slept again that night, and neither could stop smelling her on their skin. Chapter 12, Mark Me or Kill Me. The Moonbind chamber was not meant for love. Its walls were carved from the bones of the mountain, streaked with old rites and older regrets. Light came not from flame, but from the silver veins embedded deep in the stone, glowing softly, like a wound that never healed. At its heart stood the marking altar. Cold, unforgiving, and on it, Seraphina. Her limbs were spread, bound by silver-forged chains that glimmered with binding runes. Her dress, if it could still be called that, hung in tatters around her thighs. Her feet were bare, toes curled as if in silent protest. Stray strands of her raven hair clung to her damp cheeks, hiding nothing of the tear-streaked devastation there. Around her, the circle of elders watched in stony silence. Behind them, the marking adjudicator raised his voice. "On this moon's turning, we gather to resolve the fracture in our pack's spiritual bond." The Omega Seraphina stands at the center, marked by two alpha instincts, but claimed by none. The council decrees that the soul bond must be severed or sealed. Whispers stirred like smoke. She heard none of it. She only felt the stone beneath her spine. Cold. So cold. Like death. Cashin stood to her right, a crimson slash of fury in ceremonial black. His jaw was set, but his scent was a storm, restless, less laced, barely held in check. Alaric stood to her left, solemn as shadow. His hands were at his sides, fists clenched until his knuckles cracked. He looked at her, but not with desire. With devastation. The adjudicator spoke again. "The choice lies between the two alphas. Whomever she yields to." "I won't." Seraphina's scream tore through the chamber. Silence cracked. Then she sobbed. "I won't choose. Don't make me. Please." The chains rattled as her body curled, as far as the shackles would allow. She shook uncontrollably, head bowed, knees trembling. "Kill me," she choked. "If you want peace, just kill me. Don't let them touch me. Don't let them own me." Cashin's eyes flared gold. Alaric took a step forward. The elders murmured among themselves. "Her refusal only proves the instability of an unsealed bond," one said. "She is nearing collapse," another muttered. "This cannot go on. She needs to be anchored." Seraphina laughed, a wet, broken thing. "I don't need to be anchored," she wept. "I need to be left alone." Cashin's voice rang sharp. "You think she's safe like this? She's dying from the bond rift. She dreams in fever and wakes in heat. You want to watch her tear herself apart because she's too afraid to choose." "Afraid of you," Alaric said lowly. Cashin turned on him. "Don't pretend she loves you. And don't pretend she wants you. A growl bloomed between them, low, ancient, full of teeth. The adjudicator slammed his staff down once. Enough. The Omega will be sealed by whichever Alpha can prove they offer peace, not conquest. Seraphina jerked her face upward, eyes swollen and red. Don't touch me, she whispered. Don't. Not either of you. Please. I'll do anything. I'll leave. I'll go into exile. Just don't bite me. Cashin took a step forward. She recoiled violently. Don't, she screamed. I'll kill myself, I swear. I'll bite my own tongue. I'll bleed out. Don't come near me. Cashin froze. The rage on his face collapsed into something else. Something uglier. His voice shook. You don't even see me. Then he turned, cloak sweeping behind him like fire, and left. Just like that. Gone. Alaric stood still. Then he did the one thing no one expected. He knelt. Not in command. In surrender. He lowered himself at the base of the altar, at her feet, and raised his hands slowly, palms up. I won't bite you, he said softly. She flinched. I won't mark you. Not with teeth. His fingers trembled as he reached for the chain around her wrist, not to remove it, but to brush a kiss to her fevered skin just below the shackle. I recognize you, he whispered. With all that I am. I claim you in name, not in scar. The elders stirred in confusion. That's not how it's done. It's not binding. She'll still burn. But Seraphina had stopped shaking. Tears still streamed down her cheeks, but her eyes were wide now. Focused. Why? She breathed. Why do this? He lifted his gaze, red-ringed and shining. Because you cried, he said. And you didn't cry for him. Her throat clicked, lips trembling. You're wrong. I cried for. He stood. I know. And somehow, that was enough. The adjudicator's voice rang out again. The ritual has been altered by vow. The Alpha Alaric has offered bond without bite. The council will assess whether. Let her down, Alaric said. She has not yet been. I said let her down. There was something in his voice that made stone flinch. Two elders rose. The chains released with a hiss. Seraphina crumpled forward, too weak to catch herself. Alaric caught her. Not as a conqueror. Not as a savior. Only as someone who refused to let her fall. He wrapped her in his dark coat, shielding what was left of her modesty, then lifted her into his arms. The moonbind chamber watched in silence as he carried her past the altar, past the elders, past the judging stares and murmurs and laws. She stirred once against his chest. You didn't bite me, she mumbled. I didn't, he said. But you won't let me go either. No. A breath. Shallow. Why? His voice was a ghost in her ear. Because you only cry for me. She didn't speak again. Only curled closer, like she didn't believe him, but wished she could. Chapter 13. Beneath the Wolf Moon. The Wyfong courtyard had always stood silent beneath the moons, its snow-laced arches ancient, reverent, built to withstand centuries of power. But not tonight. Tonight it pulsed. The full moon swelled like an eye in the heavens, and beneath it, something in the stone trembled, something old, buried, forgotten until now. Seraphina lay curled on the marble floor of her chamber, a thin sheet twisted around her body. Her lips parted in a soundless gasp, skin dewed with sweat that refused to cool. She didn't speak, didn't cry. She had long since lost the strength for either. But her presence called. Unknowingly, unwillingly, her spirit bled into the air. A pulse, a ripple. And the Alphas heard it. Not in words. In instinct. They felt the ache through the marrow of their bones. They dreamed of fire and fog and the taste of skin between their teeth. Some growled in their sleep. Some woke with claws. Some didn't wake at all, but shattered glass in their attempts to crawl toward the scent. Moonbind guards were posted double, tripled, but it wasn't enough. There was no such thing as enough when an Omega called like that. And Seraphina didn't even know she was calling. She was half-conscious at best, fevered from the unsealed mark, the failed ritual, the weight of too many fates trying to carve themselves through her. She wasn't even aware when the wards broke. But Cashin was. He'd been waiting for them to. He didn't roar. Didn't smash. He simply walked. The guards didn't stop him. Couldn't. He murmured, "She's crying." They blinked, dazed, confused. "She's crying, and I can hear it." The hall opened like a parted sea. His scent burned through the lingering smoke of the other alphas. Strong, controlled, and deeply possessive. He found her in the center of the bed, curled like a wounded cub. And for the first time in weeks, Cashin softened. He dropped to his knees beside her and touched her cheek, not with hunger, but fury disguised as gentleness. "You don't even scream anymore," he whispered. She didn't answer. So he gathered her up. No resistance. No sound. Just the unbearable heat of her body pressed to his, her head lolling against his shoulder. He kissed her temple once, then vanished into the night. Far below, across the courtyard, a wolf screamed. Alaric's mind splintered the moment he smelled it. Cashin. The traitor's scent. Wrapped around her. She was gone. And he knew who had taken her. He didn't think. Didn't shift slowly. The change tore through him like wildfire. Flesh ripped to fur. Bones cracked, realigned. Claws burst free. In seconds, he was no longer Alpha Alaric of the Council. He was Beast. Silver-furred and blood-eyed, he launched over the eastern wall like a starved predator. The forest answered. Wolves from all corners of the keep howled in chaos, confused by the scent, the moon, the hunger. But none matched his fury. None matched his speed. He tracked them through the trees, through the snow-slicked roots, through trails of broken branches and disturbed earth. And when the red wolf envoys appeared, sentinels meant to cover Cashin's retreat, Alaric didn't hesitate. He didn't growl. He slaughtered. Snapped jaws. Torn limbs. Throats open like fruit. Their howls didn't last long. He was no longer a man bound by law or ritual. He was instinct and vengeance. And she was still crying, in his head, in his bones, in every corner of his soul where she had settled like the last light before darkness. He would find her. He would. Even if he had to burn the whole damn forest down. Cashin laid her gently on the moonlight cloister's altar. It was a remnant of the old rites, half forgotten, half feared. The stones still hummed with the weight of moon prayers and blood oaths. And in its hollow center, he placed her like an offering no god deserved. She moaned faintly as the cold stone met her spine, lashes fluttering like broken wings. "Easy," he whispered. He draped his cloak over her, tucking it carefully beneath her thighs, over her chest. She looked small like that. Fragile. Nothing like the storm she once was. And yet every line of her was etched into him, deeper than any mark. He sat beside her, one leg folded, the other outstretched, his hand pressed lightly to her hip through the thick fabric. "Do you remember," he murmured, "how you used to laugh when it snowed?" No answer. She barely breathed. "I do. Even now." The firelight from the ward torches flickered across her face. Shadows kissed her cheekbones, caught in the dip above her collarbone. He bent closer, just above her ear. "I don't need you to wake up and love me," he said, voice rough. "I just need you to wake up and see me first." She stirred, but only to exhale a breath that ghosted across his throat. Not in rejection. Not in anything at all. He kissed her temple again. And stayed, guarding her like a wolf guards its only cub. Alaric broke through the tree line just before dawn. His fur was soaked in blood. None of it hers. His breath steamed in great clouds, eyes glowing like hellfire in the dying moonlight. And he smelled her. Finally. It was faint, buried beneath Cashin's presence, but it was hers. Sweet and salt-warm, like a heartbeat held too long. He stepped forward, then stopped. The cloister rose in front of him, ancient, sacred, filled with the scent of the male who had taken what wasn't his. Inside, he heard nothing. No cry. No gasp. No scream. just silence. And that, more than anything, made his hackles rise. "She's not supposed to cry like that," he whispered, voice low, human again, trembling with rage and something worse beneath it. "She's not supposed to cry that quiet." The snow beneath his feet melted in the heat of his rage, and his eyes locked on the door ahead. He didn't knock. He didn't ask. He stepped into the dark. Chapter 14, Chosen in Chains. The first sensation Seraphina felt was not pain. It was weight. A cloak, thick and worn, smelling of ash and wolf skin, pressed heavy across her body. Her limbs refused to move beneath it. Her mouth was dry, her throat seared as if it had been dragged through fire, and her lashes stuck together with sleep and salt. Then came the ache. It bloomed slowly, a blossom of bruises, hips, ribs, wrists, her neck where the mark pulsed faint and sore like an unfinished vow. She opened her eyes, barely. The sky above her was not the silver-washed heavens of moonbind. It was cracked stone, flecked with glowing moss and low archways draped in red banner cloth. The air was damp, tasting of ancient minerals and charred offerings. A temple. But not a sacred one. The ruined heart altar. And she was not alone. Cashin knelt beside her, his knees buried in the straw-strewn floor, hands braced on either side of her body, watching her with a strange kind of reverence. Not triumph. Not lust. Hunger, restrained by grief. "You're awake," he said softly. "I didn't think you'd wake so soon." She couldn't answer. Even blinking hurt. He reached behind him and brought a tin cup to her lips, the edge cool and trembling. "Here," he murmured. "Drink. You need to." She tried. Her lips barely parted before the water slid in, too fast, making her cough. The shaking in her chest sounded pathetic, like a wounded creature that had been caged too long. "Slowly, sweetling," Cashin whispered. His hand moved beneath her head, lifting her gently until her cheek pressed against the curve of his shoulder. He fed her water like she was something fragile, something sacred. But her tears wouldn't stop. They slid down her temples, unnoticed by her, soaking into the hollow of his collarbone. She didn't sob. Didn't make a sound. Just wept like a girl who had forgotten how to scream. Cashin exhaled, jaw tightening. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said. "I never meant to." Her fingers twitched weakly at his chest. He stilled. And she looked at him. Those glassy eyes, silent, soft, shining in the torchlight like the moon itself, had broken apart inside her. "I just wanted to bring you somewhere safe," he whispered. "Somewhere they couldn't use you." Her lower lip trembled. And he bent closer. "You know I could mark you now." His voice was steady, but his hand shook where it brushed a lock of hair from her cheek. "I could do it. And no one would ever touch you again. You'd be mine." Her breath caught. "I wouldn't let anyone look at you. You'd never have to wonder who you belong to." His forehead pressed to hers. "You wouldn't have to be afraid anymore." Seraphina closed her eyes. She wanted to vanish. Wanted to vanish into him, into anything that would stop the trembling in her limbs. But instead, she shook her head. Barely. No stronger than a leaf caught in wind. Cashin didn't pull away. Not immediately. But the light in his eyes shifted. "You don't want me?" he asked quietly. She opened her mouth. No sound came. Then, finally, a hoarse whisper. "I just want to go back." Her voice cracked like old parchment. Cashin's breath hitched. She added, with a kind of desperation that made even the shadows flinch. "Even if he doesn't bite me, even if he hates me, I'm only scared that he won't come." The silence was absolute. Cashin stared at her as though something inside him had shattered. "You're not afraid of me," he said slowly. She didn't answer. "You're afraid of being forgotten." Still no answer. And that, somehow, was worse. Cashin rose to his feet so fast she flinched. His boots echoed on the stone floor as he paced to the edge of the altar, gripping the cold metal railing like it could anchor him. She should be begging, he said, to no one, to the air, to the gods he'd long since stopped believing in. She should be running. He turned, eyes blazing. But she cries for him. She curled in on herself, weak, knees drawing up, the cloak slipping slightly from her shoulder. Cashin returned. Dropped to his knees again, slower this time. The anger hadn't left him, but something else filtered through it, resignation. His hand ghosted over her arm. I didn't take you because I thought I could win, he murmured. I took you because he didn't deserve to. She blinked up at him. Tears again. Always tears. He cupped her face in both hands. His thumbs brushed her cheeks, wiping the wetness away like it insulted him. If I bite you, he said, voice low and unsteady, you'll never feel that emptiness again. She didn't speak. Even if he never comes, I'll always be here. Her fingers tightened in the cloak. Her lips trembled. Cashin leaned closer, his mouth hovering just above the still tender skin of her mark. Her breath hitched. And then, she whispered, if he comes late, if he doesn't come at all. A pause. Fragile. Shattering. Then let you be the one. Cashin closed his eyes. He didn't bite. But his lips pressed there, just once, barely enough to claim, almost enough to break. A roar tore through the mountains. It was not the call of a hunting wolf. It was rage incarnate. The red wolf sentries scattered, half-dressed, weapons forgotten. Across the border, the watchfires flickered out one by one, doused by a force that should not have been able to track through cursed stone and ironclad oath. But Alaric had never been bound by what should be. He ran in wolf form, white and wild, his claws tearing earth asunder, his eyes molten gold. He had heard her. Not in words. In sorrow. And he would answer. The ruin heart altar stood ahead, cloaked in flame-colored dusk, guarded by warriors bred for siege and silence. It didn't matter. None of it did. Because she had cried. Because he hadn't come in time. Because she still waited. And he would not let her voice be swallowed again. Alaric howled, once, sharp and long, shaking the mountains. A sound like fury. A sound like promise. Chapter 15. The Bite of Mercy. The border burned red with wolf blood. Alaric's breath tore from his lungs in ragged bursts, each inhale scorched by the iron tang of slaughter. The snow beneath his paws had long since melted to slush, now slicked dark with the bodies of those who dared slow him. They'd built a wall of fangs and flame to stop him. It hadn't been enough. The red wolves, Cashin's vanguard, had come prepared for rebellion, not for wrath. Not for him. Not for a creature that moved like vengeance and left nothing in his wake but broken jaws and shattered oaths. Alaric was no longer alpha. He was something older. Older than order, older than laws. The blood on his coat steamed in the cold air as he leapt the final barricade of thorn stakes. His right flank bled where a halberd had found its mark, his shoulder stung from a whiplash rune still pulsing faintly. But he didn't slow. Couldn't. Because he could feel her. Seraphina. She was close. Her heartbeat flickered across the link like a candle guttering in storm wind, there, then faint, then gone again. His paws hit stone. The cliff opened wide before him, Wolf-Cliff Divide, a battlefield from ages past, and now again. The ruins of old altars lay shattered beneath frost and fire. Cashin's camp had retreated to the inner arch, deeper into the borderlands. But her scent. He found it. Threaded beneath charred wood and iron. Faint. So faint. He shifted, the transformation nearly breaking him. His bones howled in protest, body flickering with the golden fire of the shift until he knelt naked and blood slicked on the cold ground. Then he saw her. She lay crumpled beneath a fallen banner, barely more than a wisp of white and pale skin against ash and shadow. Her arms were bound loosely with silk, a mockery of chains. Her lips were parted, dry. Her hair clung to her cheeks with sweat and old tears. And her mark. His eyes locked on the hollow between her shoulder and neck. Cashin had tried. Faint bruising bloomed there, a ghost of teeth. Not enough to seal. Enough to threaten. Alaric's breath hitched. He crawled to her on hands and knees, No strength left for dignity, for fear. He cradled her face. "Seraphina," he whispered. "I'm here." She didn't stir. Her chest rose, but only barely. His forehead touched hers. "I'm sorry. I should have come sooner." He looked down again. At the mark. Half claimed. Left open. Inviting. One bite from Cashin, and she would have been his forever. 1 hour more, one hesitation. He would have been too late. He was still too late. Alaric's hand trembled as he traced the edge of the bruise. "I can't leave it like this," he murmured. "They'll come again. They'll try again." He gritted his teeth. "This isn't what I wanted." His fingers brushed her lips. "But if I don't mark you now, they'll tear you apart for what you are. Not for love. Not even for power. Just to prove they could." Her skin was so soft beneath his hand. Her lashes fluttered, but did not open. A single tear slipped from the corner of her eye. Not from pain. A memory, maybe. A dream. Or perhaps something deeper. Something heard across the bond, however broken. Alaric bent over her. His mouth hovered over the bruised flesh. "I'm not doing this to keep you," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm doing this to keep you alive." And then he bit. Not with hunger. Not with rage. But with mercy. His fangs sank gently, deliberately, into the mark the other had failed to take. The moment they broke skin, power surged, golden threads spiraling from his heart to hers, tangling the frayed lines of what had once been fate. She gasped in her sleep. The bond lit. Not like fire. Like moonlight on bone. He pulled back, blood in his mouth, tears on his face. The wound on her shoulder glowed faintly now, sealed, claimed, not as a trophy, but as a shield. He whispered her name again, over and over. "Seraphina. Seraphina." She stirred. He nearly collapsed from the relief. Her eyes opened, slow as dusk. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then she exhaled. A whisper barely formed. "You finally couldn't bear it." He choked. Not on words. On the sheer weight of her understanding. She closed her eyes again. And slept. Not unconscious. Not broken. Just weary. Alaric collapsed beside her, arms wrapped around her frame, burying his face into her shoulder, into the wound he'd left that would now never be touched again by another. "I didn't do it because I loved you," he said, voice thick and low. "I did it because I couldn't bear losing myself." And so he wept. For everything she had endured. For everything he had failed to do. For everything he would now be forced to become. Above them, unseen from the cliffs, the elders watched. None spoke. None interfered. For they, too, had seen the bite. And for the first time in decades, a war was about to begin, not over land or blood or crown, but over a girl too soft for war, too quiet to command armies. And yet, here she was. Claimed by mercy. And feared for it. Chapter 16. The Price of a Bite. The scent of dusk blossom and blood hung heavy in the air. Seraphina sat still at the edge of the dusk-wing baths, her bare toes brushing the pale marbled water, yet her reflection barely rippled. Steam veiled the vaulted hall, curling around silk-draped pillars and gilded lion fountains, but none of it could mask the whispers. She had been summoned here, not invited. The Omega Court always gathered in the royal baths after dusk, when the Alpha Lords returned to war councils and the lesser packs retired. It was a ritual older than most remembered, a sanctum for rest, gossip, and silent judgments. Tonight, it had become a stage. The moment Seraphina entered, the room fell still. Dozens of eyes turned. Robes rustled. And then, like oil catching flame, the whispers began. She didn't even have a ceremony. Is she in mourning? Or just embarrassed he only bit her while she slept? She hasn't even bled properly. How can a bond be complete if she never asked for it? Asked? One woman laughed, high and brittle. She moaned. Isn't that enough for a mute little fox? Seraphina didn't respond. She didn't lift her head. Her robe clung to her body, still damp from the purifying rinse she'd been required to perform alone, away from the others. Her hair trailed like dark seaweed over her shoulders, half covering the collarbone where the mark still throbbed, faint and sealed, but visible. That was the problem. Visible. They surrounded her slowly, in practiced circles of softness that cut like blades. Kasha, the beta's sister, stepped forward first. Her silk wrap was sheer, her smile sharp as crushed glass. So, this is her. Another woman, tall, hair braided with gold thread, leaned in, voice lazy. Hard to believe. I thought the king preferred strength in his bed. Not wilting violets. Maybe that's the secret. Kasha's eyes glittered. Maybe all we had to do was cry hard enough to make him pity us. The others laughed, the sound echoing off stone and water. Seraphina's fingers tightened over the edge of her robe. She kept her gaze low. That was all it took. Kasha's foot nudged her shin. Won't even look us in the eye. Must be nice, being above us now. Royal mate without a wedding. Without vows. Without even earning the bite. She earned it, someone sneered. With her thighs open and her voice shut. Another hiss of laughter. But it wasn't loud. It was cruel in its hush. Kasha leaned closer. Show us. Seraphina blinked, finally lifting her head. Her lashes trembled. What? Don't pretend to be slow, Kasha said sweetly. If it's real, if he actually marked you, we should all see it. You can't. A yank. Seraphina gasped as her robe was torn from one shoulder, exposing the bare skin beneath. The mark glowed faintly, a crescent of pale scars nestled just above her collar. Small. Elegant. Unmistakable. The room erupted. She really let him. Oh, she wanted it. Look at her face. Who knew silence could be so seductive? She didn't fight him off. Not even once. They closed in, mocking, circling, some reaching out to touch. She flinched as fingers brushed the bite. Her skin reacted before her voice could, heat blooming in her cheeks, her breath caught between her teeth. They saw it. And twisted the knife. Gods, look at her blush. She's enjoying this. She likes being the helpless little pet. Seraphina curled forward, wrapping her arms around herself. Still, not a word. Not one. Only a single tear slipped from her cheek, landing silently against the marble. And still, the rage around her built. Because nothing enraged them more than her surrender. Her stillness. Her lack of defiance. Because she wasn't winning. She was simply there. Unmoving. Untouchable. Marked. They wanted her to scream. She didn't. She barely breathed. And somehow, that made them hate her more. By the time Elian entered, clad in his priestly robes, the tension had curled so tight it might have snapped the pillars apart. He didn't ask questions. He only looked at her, robes fluttering faintly in the heated air. Return to your quarters, he said softly. This place has already taken enough from you. She stood slowly, pulling the robe tighter across her chest. Her fingers trembled, but she kept her eyes on the floor. No one stopped her. Not even Kasha. Not when Seraphina passed through them like mist, silent, bowed, unbroken. But behind her, their fury burned louder than ever. And she heard every word. She didn't cry until she was alone. Back in the quiet of her chamber, she collapsed against the door, robes damp with bathwater and shame. Her knees hit the floor. Her arms wrapped around her shoulders, shielding the mark like it had somehow betrayed her. Her breath came in hiccups. No one knocked. Until they did. The door flung open before she could move. Alaric. His presence filled the space like storm wind, bare-chested, still smeared with the ash of whatever battlefield he'd fled to get here. His eyes went straight to her, her huddled frame, her shaking shoulders. He crossed the room in 2 strides. Who touched you? She didn't answer. His hands gripped her arms. Who touched you? Her eyes lifted slowly. Red. Wet. But eerily calm. He froze. I'll kill them, he said hoarsely. Say the word. I'll burn every last one of them where they stand. She blinked, then whispered, will you kill me too? He stilled. She leaned forward, resting her forehead to his chest. Her voice came like wind through reeds. If I had begged you not to bite me, would you have? His hands trembled. No. She nodded, as if that was what she expected. And yet, that quiet, nodding acceptance hurt him more than any scream. I didn't mark you to trap you. You marked me because you were afraid someone else would. Silence. Then, his arms closed around her. Not tightly, but as if afraid she'd vanish. I didn't want them to ruin you. They already have. She curled into him. I just wanted to be quiet. He held her tighter. You are. And they hate you for it. She laughed. Bitter. Then maybe I deserve it. He pressed his lips to her temple. No, you don't. She didn't reply. She only clung to him, the scent of the bite still lingering faintly between them, sweet and raw and unfinished. Outside, the Omega Court howled for order. Inside, she wept in the arms of the man who had saved her. And ruined her just the same. Chapter 17, Red Ruin. The banners rose at dawn. Blood-red cloth slashed with silver fangs, sigils not of the crown, but of something wild, raw, and newly born. In the wastelands north of the river, the ruined heart camp stirred like a beast roused from centuries of sleep. Fires burned through the night. Smoke smeared the pale horizon. And on the makeshift stone dais, surrounded by soldiers in ash-colored armor, Cashin stood bareheaded, barehanded, and unflinching as the wind howled. They call it a bond, he said, voice steady enough to quiet even the fire pits. But what is it, this thing we glorify as sacred? No one spoke. Only Eris, the red wolf tactician, stood at his flank, her war paint still smeared from the night's march. Cashin raised his hand. It is not devotion. It is not love. It is control. A murmur passed through the gathered crowd, Omega and Alpha alike. From the youngest foot soldiers to the exiled pack lords, to the ones whose necks bore no mark and yet whose eyes burned with knowing. Cashin's gaze swept them all. The bite, he said, is a leash. He let the word echo. Then, I have seen what it does. How it hollows out the will of an Omega. How it shreds the mind of an Alpha who dares to love instead of possess. He lifted a piece of silk, white, faintly stained with rose. A sleeve torn from a robe. The crowd hushed further. This belonged to her. He didn't name her. He didn't have to. Some of you saw her, trembling in the king's hall, wrapped in silence like a funeral veil. A girl the court mocked, pitied, and praised all in the same breath. A girl whose tears became the seal of a power she never chose. Eris took a step forward, voice sharp and clear. The king bit her without vow, without consent, without ceremony, and then paraded her as his mate. Cashin's voice dropped. I heard her weeping through the bond. Heard it echo through 1,000 minds. He raised his head. And that is the moment I broke. The crowd stilled. I will not serve a throne that feasts on obedience. I will not follow a crown that feeds on suffering. His hand closed into a fist, lifting high. From this day forward, I declare the founding of the Free Pack. The name struck like lightning. The Free Pack will recognize no bite as law, no scent as sentence. We reject the tyranny of the bond. Cheers exploded. A few howled. Others wept. But above the noise, Cashin spoke one last word, so quiet it wasn't for them. It was for her. Seraphina. His eyes drifted northward. Past the scorched fields. Past the broken border walls. To the palace. He did not speak aloud. He didn't need to. Her name hummed across the bond. She felt it as a flicker, just as she touched the petals of the moonflower resting in her lap. Her room was dim. Quiet. The scent of crushed blossoms lingered around her like breath held too long. She had not left the bed. The mark on her collar still throbbed like a closed wound too soft to scab. And then, his voice. If you want it, I'll take the throne for you. She jerked upright, the flower dropping from her fingers. You don't need to be bitten. You don't need to kneel. You don't need to cry again. Her lips parted, soundless. Just say the word, and I'll build you a world where you rule by your silence, not in spite of it. Where no one touches you without your command. Tears rose unbidden. Not because she was moved, but because she was seen. And yet, she couldn't answer. She sat still, palms pressed to the sheets. Her whisper cracked in the silence. He still remembers me crying. Outside the high windows, bells began to toll. She didn't move. Not when the doors burst open. Not even when Alaric stormed in, red-cloaked and pale from the War Council, his fists shaking. It's begun. He didn't need to say what. She already knew. Cashin's hell still rang in her bones. They've declared open rebellion, Alaric said, pacing. Eris is commanding the flanks. They're recruiting Omegas by the hundreds. Unmarked ones. Bitten ones who've chewed through their own bonds. His breath came shallow. He's not fighting for power. He's fighting to erase the old order. He turned. She sat motionless. Did you hear what he called you? She didn't reply. He said you'd be the moon queen of his new reign. The girl who broke the wolves. Still nothing. He moved to her, kneeling before the bed. His voice dropped. Do you want that? She finally looked at him. Her voice was a murmur. What does it matter what I want? It matters to me. She looked away. He gripped her hands. I don't want you to cry anymore, Sarah. She pulled her fingers back. Too late. His touch had already burned. I'll take you away, he said, fierce. Tonight. We'll ride past the border. I'll hide you in the marshes. We'll leave this madness behind. She looked at him for a long moment, then turned to the window. The moon had risen. Not full. Not yet. But red. Like ruin. You can run from the crown, she said softly. Her eyes glistened in the firelight. But can you run from me? He froze. Not because he had no answer, but because he already knew it. He couldn't. No one could. Not Cashin. Not Alaric. Not even she herself. Chapter 18, Mate's Mercy. The terrace was cold. Not with wind nor rain, but with the stillness of a world on the edge of unraveling. Alaric stood alone before the ancient stone arch, the place where blood oaths were once whispered under moonlight, where spirits had watched centuries of bonds formed and broken. His cloak trailed behind him like dusk itself, and though he bore the weight of a crown, his hands were empty. Summon the council, he had said that morning. But now no one spoke. Even the elders, gray-eyed and ever proud, stood silent in their ceremonial robes. And at the center, Seraphina sat cloaked in white, the collar of her robe rising to cover the mark at her neck, her lips parted not in objection, but absence. Alaric turned toward them all. I withdraw my claim to the throne. The words struck harder than any hoe. Elder Kale stepped forward first. This is treason. This is mercy, Alaric answered. To the girl, another elder spat. Or to yourself? He did not flinch. To us all. A pause. Then, I will sever the mark. A gasp rippled through the stone-paved hall. Even Seraphina blinked. Her gaze lifted, just slightly, as if the sound had disturbed her sleep. She bears my scent, Alaric continued. But not by her choice. And I cannot love a cage. Even one lined in silk. His voice cracked then. Just once. She never asked to be mine. His eyes sought hers. Found only silence. Let the record show, he said, lower now, that Alaric of the crown line renounces both throne and bond. The wind picked up. Elian, who had said nothing all this time, finally stepped forward. The priest's silver-threaded sleeves trembled as he lifted the ceremonial blade, one designed not for flesh, but for soul. You understand, Elian said softly, this cannot be undone. I do. He knelt. And when the blade's tip touched the base of his throat, a pulse of pain exploded through the link that bound him to her. He felt her flinch. Not aloud. Not in body. but deep, beneath the skin of thought. The link that had once hummed like breath between them, now fractured like glass. He collapsed forward, breath ragged. The world did not shatter, but it shifted. And she did not move. Not until much later. Not until the hall had emptied. Not until the bells had rung, announcing the Alpha's abdication. Not until she stood behind him in the stillness of his private chamber, his name unspoken. He sat at the edge of the bed, head bowed, hands braced on his knees. "I expected you to hate me," he murmured. She said nothing. "I expected you to say something cruel. To tell me it was cowardice. Or arrogance. Or weakness. Still nothing. I thought, maybe if I bled enough for you, you'd finally look at me the way I look at you." His voice faded. Then, at last, she stepped closer. Her feet made no sound against the stone. He didn't look up until he felt the warmth of her presence beside him. Then, her whisper. "Why would you give up everything?" He turned to her. Her eyes were wet. But not in fury. Not even sorrow. Just confusion. "Because you are not a prize to be won," he said. "You're not a kingdom, Sarah. You're a person." Her lashes fluttered. "And if the only way to keep you," he continued, "is to own you, then I never truly had you to begin with." She sat down slowly, leaving distance between them. "I never asked you to leave at all," she said. "I know. And if I let you stay," she whispered, "it would have been easier for both of us." He smiled bitterly. "Easier isn't always better." She looked away. After a moment, she spoke again. "You broke the bond." "Yes. Then why do I still feel it?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Or maybe he did. Because it wasn't the mark. It was him. She turned her face slightly, eyes downcast. "If you're not king anymore," she said, almost too quietly, "then I suppose you're free." He watched her. And when she added, "That means I can leave too," his heart clenched in his chest. "You could always leave," he said. Her fingers tightened in her lap. He leaned closer. Not to touch. Just to see her better. "If you go," he whispered, "I won't stop you." But I'll wait." She looked at him, startled. "I'll wait," he said again, "for the day you choose me." "I already stayed," she said, voice small. "That's not the same." He smiled. Not with triumph. With grief. "You sleep beside me, Seraphina. You wake to my voice. You wear my scent, even now that it's fading." He reached up, paused just before touching her cheek. "But you never say it." Her breath trembled. "You never say you love me." She dropped her gaze. "I don't know what love feels like." He exhaled. And touched her hair, so gently she barely noticed. "That's the cruelest thing," he murmured. "I know what it feels like." She looked down at her hands. "I'm not whole," she said. "I don't need you to be whole. I'm broken." "I've seen your pieces," he whispered, "and I still want them." Her voice wavered. "What if I run again?" He looked her straight in the eye. "I'll follow." She let out a breath. And for once, only once, she leaned into him. Not much. Just enough to rest her head near his shoulder, not touching, but near enough that he could feel her presence warm the air. They stayed like that for a long time. Until the candles dimmed. Until the stars blinked above the terrace they would never walk again. She eventually lay down. He joined her, carefully, as if she were carved from frost. And as she drifted into sleep, her fingers curled weakly around his wrist. Then soft. Barely more than breath. "If you ever bite me again." He stiffened. Her lashes fluttered in sleep. "I'll never be able to run." His eyes flew open. She didn't stir. Only curled closer, unconscious words still lingering in the air like perfume. He stayed awake. Long after the moon sank. And in the hush between heartbeats, he whispered back. "Then when will I ever dare?" Chapter 19. The Trial of the Crown. The first scream didn't come from a mouth. It came from the marrow of every living wolf. A wave of invisible pain rolled through Luncourt like the shattering of 1,000 glass blades. The sky cracked with a soundless thunder, and every alpha within 100 miles dropped to their knees. except Seraphina. She stood at the center of the amphitheater, trembling. Not by choice, not by fear, but because something had wormed its way into the tether of her spine, a pulse, foreign and familiar, biting into the frayed threads of her soul. Her lungs seized. Her knees buckled. Yet her body held, upright and frozen, like a lightning rod for the storm erupting through the royal bloodlines. Cashin, she choked. She didn't see him. No one did. But he was there. In her bones. In the residual mark at the base of her neck. In the cold, coiling laughter curling beneath the thoughts of every alpha on the royal seat. Easy now, little thorn, his voice crooned through her skull. Let them feel what it's like when they use someone like you as a dam. Alaric was the first to reach her. He lunged through the shaking stone, shoving aside 2 council guards and catching her just before her legs gave out. Seraphina. His voice broke. What's happening? What's wrong? She couldn't answer. Every part of her was open, a bridge, a vessel, a raw, sparking channel. Cashin's attack wasn't on the body. It was spiritual, a precision strike against the psychic lattice that connected the highest bloodlines. A twisting of the Alpha Link network. And somehow she, marked, unmarked, broken, had become the center. She's buffering the entire psychic storm, Elian murmured, eyes wide with horror. She's the only reason the rest of us haven't gone rabid. Alaric looked down at her, straining to contain his own growl as the pressure closed in on his mind. She was burning up, her skin slick with sweat, her lips parted in silent gasps, her body arching like something invisible was pulling strings inside her. Don't fight it, Cashin whispered, still inside her skull. You'll tear yourself apart. I'm not yours, she rasped aloud, voice cracked and thin. Not yet. A wave of psychic heat slammed through the amphitheater. The oldest elders fell to the ground. A sentinel clawed at his own throat. Wolves shifted involuntarily, some snarling, some howling, others collapsing into seizures. Only her presence, her existence, kept them from disintegrating completely. She's stabilizing the resonance, said Elder Meron. Even untrained. Even like this. She's not stabilizing, Alaric spat. She's suffering. The High Council convened that night. In the bowels of the mountain, beneath the crypt where soul-binding oaths were once sealed, the chamber of spirit veil lit with icy blue flame. The air reeked of sacred blood and stone. Seraphina lay half-conscious on the altar, bones too fragile to rise again, her breath shuddering with every tremor from the psychic field, still lashing the wolves outside. Alaric stood guard, pacing like a caged beast. We can't hold the lines much longer, Elder Lyso said. Cashin's attack is surgical. Without a stabilizer, the alpha lattice will rupture. We have won, another elder replied, staring at her. Alaric snapped around. No. You saw it yourself. The resonance passed through her. Not around her. She didn't resist it. She absorbed it. She's not an artifact. She could be. Alaric crossed the chamber in 2 strides. Say that again, he hissed, and I'll show you just how broken our hierarchy is. You've lost your claim to the throne, the elder said coldly. You don't get to dictate policy anymore. I didn't lose it. I gave it up. Don't make me take it back. Another surge rippled through the link. Seraphina whimpered. Cashin's voice slid between her ribs like a knife dipped in honey. Let them chain you. Let them pour their need into you. I'll be waiting on the other side. And when they're done, I'll tear it all down. She twisted on the altar, eyes fluttering open. Stop it, she whispered. Alaric was there instantly, kneeling beside her, brushing the wet hair from her cheek. You're here, she said softly. I'm here. Still not biting me? He let out a choked laugh. You're delirious. You're guilty. I know. She blinked slowly. I don't want to be anyone's comfort. His hand stilled. And around them, the council paused. Alaric rose to his feet, gaze sweeping the circle of old wolves. You hear her, he said. You feel her. She was made for this, someone muttered. No, Alaric said. He stepped onto the inner dais, the place reserved for declarations. She wasn't made. She was mauled, twisted, broken open and remolded by every alpha who ever thought she was easier to bear than to love. A hush fell. She never chose any of this. He looked down at her again, at the girl who had once knelt before him like a supplicant and now lay shaking from power too vast to be her own. She will not be your container. Then what is she? Elder Kale asked. Alaric met their gaze without flinching. She is my vow. The silence that followed was the longest Seraphina had ever heard. Until she passed out. She awoke later, alone. The crypt ceiling arched high above her, etched in silver and lit with soft flames. Her body felt like crushed glass. But something was different. The storm had stopped. The pressure gone. She sat up slowly and found Alaric waiting in the shadows. You disobeyed the council, she said. I did. They'll strip you of your name. I've already given that up. She looked away. Then why are you still here? He moved to her side, kneeling again, always kneeling. Because I promised myself I wouldn't leave you alone again. She stared at him. Even if I don't love you, I'll love enough for both of us. Even if I can't give you anything, you already gave me everything. Her voice broke. What if I'm not a person anymore? What if I'm just a... You're not. He leaned closer. Don't let them write your name into the wall of function, he whispered. Let me write it where it matters. On my soul. On my memory. Not as a weapon. Not as a cure. As you. She closed her eyes. Cashin's whisper was still there, faint now, like an echo in a cave after the torchlight dies. But Alaric's hand was warm. She didn't take it. But she didn't pull away. Chapter 20, The Bite That Wasn't. The sanctuary felt too quiet. Not in the way a holy place should, reverent, still, steeped in grace, but in the way an old wound forgets to bleed. Mubine's sanctuary lay nestled beneath a ring of frost-bitten pines, half forgotten by all but the wolves who still dared remember what a vow once meant. Its walls were bone-pale stone, grown soft with moss and haunted by echoes. No flames burned. No prayers were spoken. Only the moonlight filtered in, and in its sheen, two figures stood facing one another beneath the open dome. Seraphina's breath fogged in the cold. Her hands were clenched in the folds of her robe. Alaric stood a few paces away, the mark of the high blood still etched across his collarbone, faint now, as though even the ink of legacy had begun to fade from him. I asked the council for a sanction, he said quietly. They gave it. She didn't ask what. She already knew. The old laws called it a dual vow mark, not just alpha to omega, but omega to alpha. An unbreakable bond, sealed not by possession but by equal pain. No domination. No hierarchy. Just two fangs, two pulses, two oaths. One soul, split and shared. But only if both sides bit. You're shaking, he said. Seraphina tried to still herself. Her body didn't listen. I'm not afraid, she said, which wasn't true. He didn't call her on it. Instead, he stepped closer and offered his throat. His head tilted. His hair fell away from his neck, exposing the strong, pale skin just beneath the jawline, the place where alphas marked, where blood ran closest to the heart, where heat pooled and nerves screamed. One bite. That's all it would take. One moment of courage. And she couldn't. Her feet stayed rooted. Her stomach turned. Her fangs didn't even ache. Her lips parted. I'm sorry. I'm not rushing you. But you are. Everything is. The silence between them grew too wide. I'll bite you, she whispered, almost inaudibly. Just, not first. He lowered his head, and for a moment, it seemed like it was enough. But it wasn't. Not for this vow. Not for the gods who watched from the stone. Not for the bond that demanded symmetry. She had to mark him. And she couldn't. I'll guide you, Alaric said gently. You don't have to do it alone. I'll kneel, if it helps. She stared at him, breath unsteady, lips trembling. It's not the height. Then what is it? I'm afraid of hurting you. He smiled, soft and bitter. I've already bled more for less. He stepped forward again, cupped her cheek. I want to be hurt by you, he said. I want your teeth in me. Not as punishment. Not as a collar. As a vow. I want it to mean something. Tears sprang to her eyes. Her fingers reached for him, then retracted. You're giving me everything, she said. But I don't know how to take it. His voice dropped hoarse. Then don't take. Just touch. He pulled her gently against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, slow, steady, real. And yet, I'm scared, she whispered. Of me? No, her voice cracked. Of being too weak to deserve it. He pulled back just enough to see her eyes. You think strength is what makes you worthy? I think being less broken would help. He leaned down, resting his forehead against hers. You're not broken, he said. You're soft. That's not the same thing. But I can't even, her voice broke again. I can't even bite. I know. She opened her mouth. Closed it again. I want to, she whispered. I do want to. But I'm not good enough to hurt someone like you. He exhaled slowly, as if something inside him had cracked open. His hands slid down to her waist, anchoring her. You think hurting me would ruin me? I think hurting you would ruin me. Something flickered behind his eyes, grief, maybe. Or something heavier. He stepped back and turned his head, exposing his throat fully to her. His voice was quiet. Then let me hurt first. Alaric. I'll take the mark. Again. As many times as you need. But know this, Seraphina, every time you flinch from binding me, I don't feel rejected. I feel responsible. Her knees weakened. I never wanted you afraid of me, he said. I wanted to be the place you felt safe. She moved to him, eyes wide and shining. Her hand pressed against his chest, above his heart. She leaned in. Close. Closer. Her lips brushed the edge of his neck. She could taste the warmth of his pulse. Her jaw trembled. She bared her teeth, and then folded into his arms with a choked sob, burying her face in his chest. I'm sorry, she wept. I'm so sorry. He didn't flinch. Didn't pull away. Didn't try to make her finish what she couldn't. He just held her tighter. Shh, he murmured. It's all right. You don't have to bite me to belong. But I want to. Then one day you will. She hiccuped against him, body fragile, voice barely audible. What if that day never comes? Then I'll stay unmarked, he said, brushing his lips against her hair. I'd rather be yours in silence than another's in blood. Her fingers curled into his shirt, clinging like she was drowning. Cashin's voice slid in then, soft as spider silk. Look at you, he whispered into the corner of her mind. Still trying to earn what was already yours. Still begging to deserve love when all you've ever done is survive. She squeezed her eyes shut. They'll make you feel like you failed. But you didn't. You just couldn't twist your teeth into something sacred. That's not weakness. That's truth. She pushed the voice away. Alaric pulled her back. They stood there for a long time, neither speaking. Just the sound of wind through the ancient sanctuary stones, the shadows of old spirits watching without judgment. When she finally lifted her head, her voice was a ghost. I'm not refusing you. I know. I'm just not enough. You're more than enough. She met his eyes. Then why do I still feel like I failed you? He rested his palm against her cheek. You didn't fail me, he said. You spared me. From what? From ever thinking this bond was about power. She trembled again. If I try again tomorrow, I'll still be here. And if I can't? Then I'll bite you 1,000 times until you believe you're worth being bound to. The breath left her lungs. And in that moment, it didn't matter that no mark had been made. Because he had already carved himself into the softest part of her. Not with teeth, but with patience. Chapter 21, Mate's Mercy. It began with a howl. Not one, but many, a rising, ragged chorus erupting from the ridges beyond the sanctuary wall. The kind of sound that stripped the air of reason and made the bones remember what fear felt like. Seraphina stirred before her body did. Her mind brushed against something hot and bright, something clawing at her from the edge of consciousness. Then the pressure came. An invisible grip around her ribs. A pull, mental, visceral, ancient, dragging her from sleep as if summoned not by name, but by need. She gasped and sat up. The world was dark. Lit only by moonlight and fire, the moonbind sanctuary now bled chaos. Bells rang. Wolves ran. The scent of smoke and steel laced the air. "Where is she?" someone bellowed. Her name. She heard it. Not as a call, but as a command. Seraphina. Then again. Mine. Her body buckled. The mark. The mark she hadn't made. The bond that hadn't sealed. The teeth that hadn't sunk deep enough. Now it screamed. Her hands clutched her chest, trembling. Her throat ached with pressure she couldn't swallow down. He's here. Not Alaric. Cashin. His presence thundered through her nerves. His fury pushed into her skull like a tide of ash. She doubled over, tears spilling before she knew she was crying. "Make it stop," she whispered. But the cry only opened a door. Wolves. Dozens. No, hundreds. Charging from the moonline ridge like blood from a severed vein. They came with red war paint and silent fangs, armored in nothing but their leader's will. Cashin walked at the front, every step matching the rhythm of her pulse. He didn't howl. He didn't roar. He just stared ahead with a kind of devastation reserved for men who'd burned their gods and still couldn't find peace. Seraphina's mind broke open. Her pain echoed. Not screamed. Not shouted. Cried. And the cry traveled like a tremor through every wolf still tethered to her scent. They felt her. Felt the ache in her chest where a bond had half formed and never completed. Felt the trembling in her fingers as her body betrayed her. Felt the mercy she begged for without words. And they faltered. Alphas tripped mid-charge. Betas growled and looked around in confusion. Even the vanguard blinked in disoriented silence, teeth bared, eyes wild. Cashin didn't stop. "You feel it, don't you?" he shouted as he stepped into the sanctuary's outer ring. "She's still calling for me." Alaric was already there. He emerged from the temple like judgment itself, no crest, no cloak, no crown. Only blood on his sleeves, and the white-hot burn of pure psychic power rolling off his shoulders like a second moonrise. "Step back," Alaric said. Cashin's smile cracked. "Still playing the high blood knight?" "I'm not playing anything." "Then why is she crying?" Alaric flinched. Behind him, Seraphina clung to the sanctuary wall, trying to stand. Her legs didn't listen. "She doesn't want you," Alaric said, each word edged in steel. "She doesn't know what she wants," Cashin barked. "Because you've turned one into something that hurts. She chose me. She couldn't even bite you." The words struck harder than any fist. Seraphina whimpered. Cashin's voice turned hoarse. "You think this bond makes you her protector? Look at her, shaking like a leaf every time you touch her. That isn't safety. That's surrender. Better surrender than delusion." Cashin lunged. They collided with the force of prophecy. Alaric met him with no armor, no weapons, only the sheer weight of his mind. His psychic aura surged, meeting Cashin's fury in a flare of light that split the stones beneath them. They fought without words now. Teeth to shoulder. Fist to jaw. Power to power. Around them, the wolves couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Seraphina's sobs had turned into something quieter now. Not because the pain was gone, but because it had numbed into a silence even she didn't understand. Cashin pinned Alaric to the ground, claws at his throat. "You made her think love means pain," he spat. "You made her afraid to be touched." "She's afraid because it's real," Alaric snarled, throwing him off. "You offered escape. I offered truth. She doesn't need your truth. She needs a choice." Cashin lunged again, and Alaric didn't dodge. The blow hit. Blood poured. Behind them, Seraphina finally screamed. "Don't let him touch me." Alaric snapped. His control shattered like glass beneath a hammer. He tore into Cashin with a fury that didn't speak, it howled. It burned. It fought like something that had nothing left to lose. Cashin grunted, faltered. His psychic grip loosened. "You're not fighting for her," he hissed. "You're fighting for your own guilt." Alaric slammed him into the ground. "She's not your mate. She's not yours either." Alaric paused. Cashin, bleeding, trembling, still managed a laugh. "She'll never be anyone's," he whispered. "You hear me? You think you can bind her, tame her, heal her, but she doesn't belong to you. Or me. Or anyone." He spit blood onto the stone. "She was made to be loved, not kept. And neither of us ever learned the difference." Then he collapsed. Seraphina crawled forward. The air stilled. Even the wolves waited. She knelt beside Cashin, eyes wide, breath shallow. He looked up, just barely conscious. "You'll keep choosing him," he rasped. "Even when it hurts. Even when it kills you." "I never wanted to choose," she said, tears streaking down her face. Cashin's lips twitched. "You can make every alpha mad. But you'll never love any of us." She blinked. "What?" "Because love to you means disappearing," he whispered. "And none of us are willing to let you go." Then he stopped breathing. A soft hush passed through the wolves. Not death, but surrender. She looked up at Alaric. He was bleeding from his temple, knuckles raw, chest heaving. He didn't speak, didn't move toward her, just watched. She pressed her palms to the stone, bent low. The moon hung high overhead. Silver. Cold. Full. "I only ever wanted one bite," she whispered. "Not to mark, not to bind, just to be seen." Her fingers curled. Not as a prize. Not as a weapon. A breath. But as someone who was here. The wind shifted. And for once, no one tried to claim her. Chapter 22, She's Not Ours to Burn. The scent of burning myrrh clung to the stones. It drifted through the open tribunal like a question no one wanted to answer. Sharp. Sweet. Sacred. The kind of smoke used in old rites, when blood was spilled not for vengeance, but for clarity. Seraphina knelt on the altar, wrists bound to the cold curve of the crescent-shaped stone. A white robe draped over her body, too clean for what had already been done to her. Her hair hung in wet ropes down her back, slick with the dew of spirit fever, as if her body still hadn't come down from the bond-induced collapse that had shaken the sanctuary to its knees. The elders stood above. 12 of them. Lined in a half-circle of judgment beneath the high moon, each bearing the symbol of their house and rank. None of them looked at her. Not directly. It was easier to watch the flames at her feet. Easier to discuss pain when it didn't look back at you with swollen eyes and bitten lips. Alaric stood apart. Not on the dais. Not among the gathered wolves who whispered about war and madness and the girl who made 2 alphas lose their minds. He stood at the edge of the tribunal like a ghost in armor, his crest removed, his hands bare. Cashin, bloodied and bound, knelt behind him under heavy guard. His head hung low, but even chained, his presence pressed like heat on the back of every throat. A voice cut the silence. "She is the source," said Elder Vena, the oldest among them. "The point of convergence. The mark that split our lines and shook the right of bonds. If she is not severed, the spiritual backlash will ripple for generations." "You mean to destroy her?" Alaric asked, voice rough. "We mean to restore order," came another voice. "What was broken can be burned. What was confused can be cleansed. A false bond must be undone. She is not a falsehood. She is a fracture." Seraphina trembled. The smoke curled around her like fingers. The incense at her feet glowed blue with moon oil and dried hawthorn, a mix reserved only for rites of spirit nullification. Not death, but something quieter. A silencing. A priestess stepped forward, raising a silver censer. Ash spilled with each swing, a rhythm of finality. "She is too powerful," one elder said. "She is too fragile," another countered. "She is too much." Alaric moved. He stepped into the tribunal ring without invitation, without armor, without title. The guard stirred. The elders frowned. But no one stopped him. He looked up at Seraphina. And for once, she didn't look away. Her lips parted. But she didn't speak. Didn't plead. Just cried, silently, soundlessly, as if her voice had been bartered long ago and no one had remembered to return it. "I will offer my mark," Alaric said. Gasps rippled like wind. The fire at Seraphina's feet flared. "She is not a thing to be offered," snapped Elder Vena. "I am offering mine," Alaric said, stepping closer. "My king mark. My dominion seal. Strip it from me. Burn it in place of her spirit threads. Break the bond that ties her to my line. Leave her untouched." "She is bound to both of you," another elder argued. "What of the other alpha?" Alaric turned to Cassian. The red wolf lifted his head, bruised eyes locking with Seraphina's. He said nothing. Then, slow and steady, he nodded once. Not at the elders. At her. It was a gesture neither proud nor bitter. Only final. Alaric faced the dais again. "Burn my birthright. Break her free. Let her go." "Why?" Elder Vena demanded. "She is no mate to you. No wolf of your blood." Alaric looked at Seraphina, then at the fire. "Because I would rather live without power," he said quietly, "than see her live without peace." The silence that followed was not heavy. It was hollow. The kind that followed collapse. Seraphina let her head fall back against the stone. Her shoulders shook. Not from fear. Not even from pain. But from the sudden emptiness. She hadn't asked for this. Had never screamed for them to choose her over crowns, over legacies. She had only ever wanted. "Please," she whispered, not even sure who she meant it for. "Don't touch me again. I'm already hurting." Alaric's face cracked. Not visibly. But like glass under frost, something inside him shattered. "I won't," he said. The guards moved. The fire brightened. Seraphina was still bound, still waiting for the knife edge of the ritual to descend. But something shifted. The priestess halted. The censer lowered. The elders, one by one, looked at the smoke curling around the girl on the stone and saw not ruin, but refusal. "She doesn't belong to us," said one softly. "She never did. She's not ours to burn." A murmur spread like wind in tall grass. Then, one by one, the elders stepped down. The guards released Cassian's chains. The priestess snuffed the incense. And Alaric, he turned to leave. No fanfare. No farewell. Only a bare neck where his crest had once rested, and a soul now unclaimed. He didn't look back. Not even when Seraphina finally spoke. "You finally." Her voice was raw, but steady. "Don't see me as a mark anymore." He paused. Turned just enough for her to see the corner of his face. "No," he said. "I see you as the one thing I could never hold without hurting." Then he vanished into the hollow beyond the tribunal. The moon blazed high. The smoke cleared. And behind Seraphina's neck, where no one touched her, where no ritual had burned her, something soft began to glow. A shimmer. A crescent. Not forced. Not bitten. Not branded. But chosen. A self-made mark. Of her. By her. For her. Chapter 23, The Broken Bond. The moonlight didn't warm her anymore. It spilled through the shattered arch of the Whitefang ruins in long, silver slats, casting patterns across the dust-swept stone like a memory trying to piece itself back together. Seraphina lay still beneath it, her body a quiet shape against a bed of faded furs, too thin now, too pale. The mark was gone. What remained on the nape of her neck was neither scar nor seal. It was absence, raw and quiet and final. The broken bond hadn't bled. It had simply vanished. 3 nights ago, when the fire had roared but refused to touch her, when Alaric offered himself to the elders and Cassian closed his eyes instead of claiming her again, something inside her had uncoiled. Had cracked. She hadn't screamed. Hadn't even whispered. She had only fallen. Collapsed like a marionette whose strings had finally been snipped, not by cruelty, but by mercy that came too late to save what mattered. Now she was awake. Eyes open, fixed on the curve of the moon outside the ruined tower window. Her lips were dry. Her limbs leaden. but her chest moved with steady, shallow breaths, as if her body, no longer gripped by the tug of war between mating instincts and identity, had finally found its own rhythm. The priest Elian stood nearby, robes scented with healing herbs and resignation. "She's stable," he murmured to no one. "But unmarked." "Entirely." The words lingered like smoke. "Unmarked. Unclaimed. Unchained." They said it like a curse. But to Seraphina, it felt like air. The world had stopped pressing against her skin. The invisible cords that had once dragged her toward one alpha or the other, commands hidden as cravings, affection threaded with need, had snapped. And she didn't mourn them. Didn't miss them. She simply missed silence. Not the heavy kind that comes before a choice. The kind that comes after you finally decide not to answer. "Do you wish to eat?" Elian asked softly. She shook her head. "Do you wish to speak?" She did not move. Elian bowed and left her to the moonlight. By the next dusk, she had stood. Her legs trembled, but they obeyed. She bathed alone. Dressed herself in the plain robes the healers had left folded at the basin. Tied the belt with shaking fingers. And then, without request or escort, she made her way toward the lower hold. Toward the cell where Cashin waited. 2 guards stood aside. They did not question her. She had become something strange to them. Not sacred. Not dangerous. Just untouchable. The door creaked open. He was seated on the floor, wrists bound in front of him, the metal loose now, no longer necessary. Cashin looked up at the sound. His eyes were bruised, his mouth still split at the corner, but his posture was relaxed in the way only the deeply broken could manage. Not slouched, just empty. He saw her and inhaled. "You're awake." "Yes," she said. Her voice sounded like rain on ash. "For now." He stood slowly. "They said you were free. That the mark didn't burn you." "It broke." A pause. Alaric gave up his title. Another beat of silence. Cashin stepped forward once, then stopped, as if the air between them was thicker than stone. "I tried to save you," he said. "That night." "I know. But I did it wrong." "Yes." He looked down. "I wanted you to be safe from him. I thought if I took you away, then I'd be yours instead." Cashin flinched. Seraphina looked at him, her face calm, not cruel, not cold, simply quiet. "You were wrong," she said. "When you said I cried because I couldn't let him go." He didn't speak. "I cried," she continued, "because I was afraid I'd never stop being something to possess. A bond. A vessel. A proof of power between 2 alphas." She stepped closer. Her hands were at her sides, open, not clenched. "I cried because I was easy to own. Because I said yes with my body when I didn't know how to say no with my soul." Cashin's breath shuddered. "I never meant to own you." "No," she said. "You just wanted me to be yours so badly you forgot to ask who I was outside the bond." His throat worked. "You're right." She blinked slow. "I'm not angry," she said, and that broke him more than a scream would have. "Seraphina, I'm just tired. I want to be quiet. I want to belong to no one. Not because I'm broken, but because it's the only way I'll survive." Cashin dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She turned. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't offer forgiveness like a ribbon to wrap up the wreckage. She left him kneeling in the cold cell, surrounded by what he'd never truly understood. Outside, the night waited. She returned to the tower just before moonrise. The furs had been straightened. The hearth stoked low. Alaric sat at the edge of the ruins, his coat gone, sleeves rolled to the elbow, as if he too had discarded rank and crown in exchange for something quieter. She approached, barefoot. He heard her and stood, but did not speak. She looked at him, eyes no longer pleading. "You're not king anymore," she said. "No," he said. She tilted her head. "Then tell me, are you still my only alpha?" He didn't answer right away. He stepped forward, then dropped to his knees before her, forehead pressing gently against her bare foot. "I'm not even worthy of your tears," he murmured. She looked down at him, not triumphant, not forgiving. just still. The night wind passed through the ruins, carrying nothing but the scent of crushed herbs and burnt things healed too late. She didn't pull away, didn't touch his head. But for the first time, she did not tremble. She stood, and the world did not end. Chapter 24, Let Me Fall This Time. The moon hung heavy over Moonheart Lake, its reflection trembling like a secret not yet spoken. Seraphina stood at the edge, barefoot in the cold silt, toes curling against the earth as if she feared it would give way beneath her. The night was hushed, no wolves howled, no birds stirred. Even the water dared not ripple. She had walked here alone. No guards. No priest. No alphas tugging at her bond. Just her, wrapped in a linen shift that clung to her damp skin, her hair loose, her breath quiet. Alaric waited by the waterline. He did not move toward her. Did not open his arms. He only looked. Looked like he had at the tribunal fire when the council asked for her pain and he offered his crown. Looked like he had in the ruins when she asked if he was still her alpha, and he did not answer with possession, but with reverence. Now he waited again. For her will. For her want. She stepped closer. One step. Then another. The hem of her shift dragged across the lake's silver-glazed stones. The moonlight limned her throat, her collarbone, the faint spot where a bond once bloomed and broke. She stopped a breath away from him. Her voice was a whisper, not because she meant it to be, but because that was all she had left. "Will it hurt?" she asked. Alaric's eyes darkened, not with hunger, but grief. "Yes." She nodded once. "Good." He didn't reach for her. Only asked why. Her lips trembled. Not in fear. In memory. "In the past," she said slowly, "you both marked me to stop the pain. To tether me to something when I was slipping. But now..." She looked down at her own hands. "I'm not slipping. I've already fallen." Then her gaze lifted, eyes moonlit and wet. "I just want something to carry with me. Something I asked for. Not begged. Not bled for. Just asked." Alaric's throat bobbed. He stepped closer, close enough that the scent of pine and snow and sorrow gathered between them. "You don't have to ask." "I do." She pressed her palm lightly to his chest, just above where his heartbeat thundered beneath skin and bone and oath. "Because if I don't, it's not mine." Alaric's hand rose, hesitated, then cupped the side of her face. "You are not a thing to be owned," he said, soft and aching. "I know." Her eyes fluttered shut. "But maybe, just once, I want to be chosen. Not for war. Not for peace. Just for the moment I asked you to." She took his hand and guided it down, pressed it to the nape of her neck. The skin there shivered under his touch, bare, unmarked, sacred in its own way. He understood. Still, he hesitated. "Seraphina," he murmured, "this is not a bond of survival. This won't save you. This won't fix what was broken." "I know," she said again. "Let it break me differently." Then she sank to her knees in front of him, the lake behind her, the wind lifting her hair like a benediction. Her neck arched soft and offered. Her scent was different now. Not desperation. Not heat. Just quiet permission. Alaric knelt behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. For a moment, he did nothing but breathe her in. Her warmth. Her stillness. Her small courage. Then, slowly, he leaned in. His fangs didn't tear. They sank with deliberate sorrow, guided not by hunger but by ache. Into the curve of her neck, into the place she had given him not as a right, but a gift. She didn't cry out. She exhaled. And then, for the first time, she smiled. It was faint, crooked, almost invisible, but it was there. Alaric felt the salt of it against his cheek. When he pulled back, the mark he left wasn't violent. It shimmered faintly, not gold, not silver, just moonlight embedded in skin. She leaned back against his chest. "I finally decided something," she whispered. "Even if I still don't have the strength to stand." He rested his lips against her temple. "You don't have to stand." They sat like that for a long time. No words. Just heartbeat and moonlight and breath. From far away, a flicker of sensation brushed the edge of her mind, like a thread snapped too late. Cashin's presence, faint and fraying, hovered like a ghost trying to find a door. She did not call to it. Did not send it away. It would leave when it was ready. She had made her choice. Later, she shifted in Alaric's arms and looked up. Next time, she murmured, "If I cry again." He touched her jaw gently. "I'll wait," he said. "Until you're ready." She smiled again. Not with joy. With peace. Then she closed her eyes, the lake at her back, and let herself fall, not into water, not into him. Just into rest. Because this time, falling was hers to do. Chapter 25. The weak will inherit the moon. The sky over Lungcourt Terrace was clear, almost cruelly so. No clouds to weep for her. No mist to veil the sight of what she had become. Just moonlight, white and pitiless, pouring over the marble platform where Seraphina stood, silent as the elders spoke of crowns and laws. They surrounded her like a halo of judgment, cloaks rustling in the cold air, the crescent of the moon etched beneath their feet. Beyond the balustrade, the omega clusters gathered, hushed and trembling, waiting not for power, but for permission to hope. "We propose," one of the high elders intoned, his voice heavy with the weight of centuries, "that in the absence of a sovereign alpha, the new order shall be named in her honor. The Seraphina doctrine. Bonds forged not by dominance, but by willing resonance." Whispers rippled through the ranks. No forced imprint. No clause behind vows. No more marks carved into skin without soul. Mutual, another elder echoed. Voluntary. Equal. A revolution not built with fire, but with quiet. And yet, Seraphina did not smile. She stood barefoot, the hem of her shift fluttering at her ankles. Her hands were clasped before her, fingers pale and still. Then, she dropped to her knees. The collective gasp was a wind in itself. She did not kneel like royalty in prayer, nor like a martyr in sacrifice. She knelt like a girl who had run out of places to stand. "I don't want a doctrine," she said. Her voice did not rise. It was soft, like someone speaking only to herself. "I don't want to be named after something that will bind others, even with kindness. I don't want a throne built from the fact that I survived what I never asked to endure." The elders shifted uncomfortably. One opened his mouth, but she continued, barely audible over the night wind. "I just want the right to be no one when I cry. Not a symbol. Not a queen. Not a reason." She bowed her head. "Please, don't give me power just because I didn't take it." A long silence followed. Then, Alaric, kneeling behind the circle, unseen until now, lowered his head too. Not in shame. In reverence. Around them, no voice rose to argue. Because even the strongest had begun to understand what true strength cost. Later, as the gathering dispersed, Seraphina stood alone at the moonfall grave. The stone monoliths bore the names of those lost to the Great Fracture. But tonight, they would add one more, not for the dead, but for the unclaimed. Cashin knelt before her, shackles at his wrists, blood seeping from a wound at his temple. His army, the remnants of the red-cloaked zealots, had fallen in a final, brutal clash by the edge of the border forest. He had been captured, but he hadn't fought. Not really. Now he looked at her not with hatred, but with something closer to grief. "You are not made for silence," he said. "You are a cathedral of sound. All trembling, all storm. Even your quiet is a roar." Seraphina said nothing. "I tried to own it. Tried to make you howl for me. For something. Anything." He laughed once, low and hollow. "But you never belonged to the fire, did you? You only ever belonged to the ache." She blinked slowly. Her lips parted, a breath catching, but no answer came. He leaned forward until his forehead touched the ground. "I sever you," he whispered. "Not because I hate you, but because you should never again feel what it's like to be someone's weapon." She took a step back. No. His eyes lifted to hers. Crimson. Cracked. Free. I love you, he said. But it was never love to begin with. And then, like a glass shattered without sound, Seraphina felt the thread between them snap. It wasn't pain. It wasn't relief. It was a quiet sort of hollowness, like walking into a room where someone used to wait. Cashin's body remained, crumpling like leaves under winter's first snow. But his soul, his bond, dissolved like smoke into the graveyard night. She didn't cry. Not until she returned to Loom Court. The terrace was empty now. The stars had shifted in the sky, the moon curling toward waning. She stood again where the elders had asked for her name, where wolves had offered her a throne, where fate had whispered she was meant for more. But she didn't want more. She wanted less. She stepped to the edge, wind teasing the fabric of her gown. She looked down, not over a kingdom, but into her own quietness. And softly, a tear slipped down her cheek. Not because she had been broken, not because she had been marked, but because, for once, she could be sad and no one called it prophecy. Behind her, far beyond the columned archway, Alaric stood in the shadow of a stone pillar. He did not call to her, did not disturb the silence. He had learned what others had not, that the most sacred thing in the world was to let her be. Her shoulders trembled once. She did not wipe her tears. She only looked at the empty throne and said, barely above the breath of the night wind, I'm not an Omega anymore. A pause. I'm just weak. And the moon, cruel, cold, ever watching, cast her in silver, and dared no one to disagree. Chapter 26, The Crown That Broke Us. The world had stopped asking for her, and she, at last, had stopped trying to answer. It had been weeks since the last Hell died under Luncourt's marble vaults. Weeks since the thrones were left empty, since the moon bled light upon the battlefield and took Cashin's name into the grave with it. No ceremony had followed. No coronation, no decree. Only silence. And the soft, unheard sound of someone leaving. Now, Seraphina lived by the edge of the Lake of Moonroot, where nothing dared reach too deeply into the earth. The waters there were still, so clear they mirrored not just the sky, but the hollow in a person's chest. Each morning she walked to the lake wrapped in a wool shawl that didn't quite fit. Not because it was too small, because it wasn't hers. It belonged to Alaric. So did the porch chair she always returned to. The one that creaked when she sat. The one that faced the moon whether it was day or night. She didn't speak much, but she breathed. And when the wind turned, she would tilt her face to it, as if letting the world remember her shape. Alaric never asked her to move. He carved, cooked, mended, hunted, and always returned in time to sit near enough that she could lean on him if she wished. She rarely did. Until one afternoon, when the sky bruised with the first hints of twilight and the fog curled around the lake's hem like ribbon. She was already sitting on the dock, her bare feet dipped in the chill water. He approached with quiet steps, carrying a bowl of sliced apples. She didn't look up. Only when he knelt beside her did she shift, and without a word, climbed into his lap. The bowl tumbled sideways, forgotten. Her body settled gently, as if testing whether the space would hold her without breaking. Alaric stilled. Her fingers found his collar, and her forehead came to rest over his heart. A long silence passed. Only the lake stirred. A lone fish leapt and splashed in the distance. Then, barely audible, she whispered, "Do you still want to bite me?" She didn't ask it as a dare. Not as a plea. Just a wondering. A soft ripple in the stillness between them. Alaric's arms wrapped around her, slow and sure. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. He only pressed his mouth to the crown of her head, breathing her in like memory. Then his jaw grazed her neck, not with teeth, but with the slow drag of his stubble, the gentlest bristle of skin on skin. "You always ask," he murmured. "But you never cry first." Her throat tightened. He kissed below her ear, a ghost of warmth. When you cry, I know you still need me. Her shoulders trembled, not from cold. And still, he didn't bite. The edge of violence had long since left their bond. What remained was a gravity neither could name. She shifted slightly, turning to face him, legs curled around his waist. Their breaths mingled. Her lashes were damp. But she did not break. He cradled her closer. Every time, he said quietly, I think it'll be the last. That you'll walk past me. That one day you'll remember how to be someone else's. Her fingers gripped the fabric of his shirt. He touched her lower back, thumb brushing circles, not to arouse, not to claim, just to anchor. But you come back, he said. Even if it's only in silence. That night, in the shell of the abandoned Wolf King's hall, its broken stained glass windows glittering like fallen stars, they lay on a mattress of woven leaves and stolen linen, with only the wind as witness. He did not take her. She did not ask for more. She curled beside him, her bones fragile under his palm. Her skin bore no heat, no fire, but it pulsed with life, slow and stubborn. Alaric could hear her heartbeat even in rest, a rhythm he had memorized in dreams. She stirred once, then stilled. And when the moonlight slipped through the beams, brushing her lashes like silver threads, he saw it, what she never spoke. A kind of ache that had no shape, no edge, no cure. He tucked the shawl around her, held her like something not to be healed, but simply held. Minutes passed. Or hours. He couldn't tell anymore. Then, in the stillest breath of night, her fingers found his. And nestled in her palm, half curled like something secret, was the wolf tooth he had once buried in her skin, then later carved free and handed back. A relic of pain, of promise, of a bond that never needed words. She held it like a talisman, not pressed to her chest, but loosely, as if even letting go of it now wouldn't change what they were. He leaned down, mouth brushing her temple. You don't belong to the throne, he whispered. Not to any vow. Not to any mark. His lips trailed to her ear, barely a breath away. But I'll still come when you cry. The fog rolled and then, veiling the lake, the broken roof, the two motionless shapes on the mattress. Mist kissed the floor, lapped at the walls, swallowed the last trace of footprints from the dock to the door. And when morning came, there were no witnesses. No banners. No fangs or fire. Only a girl asleep with a tooth in her hand. And a boy whose arms said everything he never would. The lake kept their reflections. For a time. Then even those were gone. And no one ever knew if they had marked each other. Or only chained each other. With grief.